Whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Zoning Hearing Board meeting of, if I knew what day it was, June 4th, excuse me, 2020. It's good to be with everyone again. We've had a bit of a hiatus, as everyone knows, and we're anxious to get back to work, hearing cases and getting things done. With that, I invite everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
the United States of America, and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and I have to work on the time separation thing a little bit. Okay, our first case this evening is Appeal 3058. The applicant, Nigel Davis, property located at 754 Newtown Road and zoned R1 residential. The applicant seeks a variance from section 280-15.d1 of the code to construct an addition to the house that will encroach into the side yard setback. Mr. Davis, you're with us this evening. Welcome. You can unmute yourself. And what brings you before us this evening?
Would you like me to swear him in?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Nora, thanks. It's easier when I can just turn to my left. Yes, please swear Mr. Davis in.
Mr. Davis, if you raise your right hand, please. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your full name for me, please, and spell both names.
That's Nigel Gordon Davis, and the Davis is spelled D-A-V-I-E-S. Gordon is G-O-R-D-O-N, and Nigel is N-I-G-E-L.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Davis, we have your application for a variance. Why don't you describe for the board the project that you're proposing to undertake and the relief that you're looking to be granted?
Okay, no, absolutely. So obviously, thank you for the opportunity. And basically what it is that I've lived in the home since 2013. It's a 4-bedroom property. And Megan McAndrew, who's with me this evening, is my fiance, and her and her daughter moved in with me in July. And of course, bringing 2 families together, we were keen that all the children continue to have their own bedroom. And at the moment, I've got 2 boys that are sharing a room. So one of the youngest ones made space for her daughter to have her own bedroom. And what we're really looking to do is to create more space in the house. In the house, we're using all the rooms. And what we'd really like to do is put a bedroom on the ground floor, as well as extra living space, which we would call a den on the, I think actually it's called the great room on the drawings. And then what we'd like to do also is because, which is interesting given the sort of COVID-19 situation, but we'd like to, off the bedroom, create a sitting room that would sit above the bedroom on the ground floor, that would in effect become an office, because with children at home, the way it's been, very difficult to function. Megan's a teacher at Eton, and I work from home all the time, and when I'm not traveling, that's where I am. So it's been quite difficult. So in some ways, the timing of what we want to do has sort of increased the need for it. So the kids are getting older. We need the space. We need the extra bedroom. And I think the way, certainly for my business, working from home is going to continue to be the way we go. And who knows what's going to happen from September onwards for Megan with school.
Okay, and in terms of the aspects of the proposed project that do not strictly comply with the zoning requirements, perhaps you could describe those to us. And I believe you've submitted a plan and some drawings with respect to the project as well, but it might be helpful to also direct the board members' attention to those materials you've provided as well.
Absolutely. So, I mean, as you can probably see, we're outside Starbucks because we have no Wi-Fi at home. I've got some drawings with me, but I don't have the whole package that was submitted, because it was all, most of what I submitted to you was I kept as an electronic version. But if you take a look, the main request that I'm looking for, or variation, is to, as you've said earlier, is to push out and encroach on the setback to the Choi property, which is to the right-hand side of my property, by 5 feet. And the main reason is that the home was, I guess, renovated, and an extension was put on in 2011-12 before I bought the home. So it is an L-shaped property. And so what we're looking to do, we've had an architect come and look at all the options, and it looks as if the best option to give us the light and the space and not sort of increase significantly the impervious area is to create sort of a U shape to the home, but to not bring the extra wing too close to the porch on the existing part of the home, which was the extension that was put on in 2011 and 12. We're really looking so that the rooms are big enough to go out a little bit further from the existing garage wall by 5 feet. And as I understand it, I mean, I've been out and even today gone out and measured. I mean, the measurements don't line up with the site drawings. And I think it's because, as I understand it, where the fence is doesn't necessarily bear any resemblance with the true property line. But from the site drawing or engineer drawing that was produced for the extension and that was ratified by Radnor, by the Township in 2011-12, it would appear that we have a 25-foot back on the, which is then have 35 feet
We
on
missed
the
that.
opposite
Okay,
side, which
yeah.
is the choice.
cut
I'm
out.
sorry, Mr. Davis. Unfortunately, there was a point that dropped out, and then the transmission restarted again, and
Okay.
compressed everything you said during a 6 or 7 second period. And our court reporter was unable, and I was unable to hear what you said. So
Perhaps Norma can read back the last part she got.
thank you, Gus. Thank you, Solicitor Economides. Sorry. Norma, are you on mute?
Yes, no, I'm looking
Oh,
for the
I'm
last.
sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Sorry, Norma.
That's all right. Let me find it here. Okay, but from the site drawing, engineered drawing produced by Radnor Township in 2011-12, it would appear.
Okay, so what I was saying was that the site engineering drawing that was approved by Radnor Township in 2011-12, that had 25 foot of setback on one side and 35 foot on the other, which satisfies the zone requirement of 60 feet in the aggregate. So as I understand it, you have to have a minimum of 25. So on the side of the house where we don't want to do anything, we retain the 25 feet. But on the other side where we have 35 feet, which 35 and 25 achieves the 60 foot aggregate, we would like to actually reduce that to 30 feet. We'd like to encroach by 5 feet into the 35 foot setback. And that's basically what I'm requesting, is the opportunity to build out by 5 feet. I have shown the drawings and the plans to the neighbors, which is Mr. and Mrs. Choi, and they have put a letter into the package for me that basically says that they're satisfied with what I'm looking to do, that it would not impinge or affect sort of their home. If anything, I think they stated it would be an improvement because it would provide more privacy.
And I'm just, okay. And with respect to the size of the proposed addition, is there anything significant about the size which compels you or obligates you to build it in the size and dimension that is shown on the plans?
I think the main reason is, as I thought I tried to explain earlier, is that if we don't go out by 5 feet, the rooms are going to be small, and we could still achieve what we want to achieve by going towards the left wing of the home by 5 feet. But then we lose a lot of light on the porch and it becomes very compressed. So with what we're looking to do, it'll create like a nice courtyard area that will mean that all the windows get adequate light. I think if we push in, as I say, we'll lose the light. And if we don't push in, we're going to have very small rooms.
And how about the idea of pushing toward the back of the lot, but inside the building envelope?
As in going further out?
Further
out towards the backyard?
Yes, that's correct.
We have a pool there. There's
Okay.
a pool, and then there's a pergola structure as well, a hardscape that was put there. So that there is no room to, without basically taking up a pool and the pergola and all the sort of the stonework that was done. Then yeah, so we'd be wasting a lot of money in doing that.
Okay.
I mean, rest assured, we did look with the architect at all the options that we could actually progress, but this was not sort of the best one. But of course, it meant that we needed this variance.
Right, and I'm looking now at the photographs that you provided with the application package, and there's one which is in black and white and appears to have been hand marked with a rendering of the proposed addition. I don't know if you recall that specific.
No, I do. You're looking sort of back onto the house.
Right.
Yes, I recognize that. Yes.
Okay. So that appears to be fitted within some hardscaped area and the existing rear of the property on that side, and the pergola and the pool are beyond that, closer to us on this side of the hardscaped area in that photograph. Is that correct?
That's correct. In other words, the sort of the single level part of the extension, there would be maybe a walkway between that wall and the pergola, that then it's hardscape there, and then after the pergola is the pool.
Okay. Are there questions from the board on this application?
Yeah, I do, John, if it's okay. Just a real quick question. You talked about the need to add a bedroom here, but
Sorry, Brad. Sorry, Norma. It's Brad Delezia speaking.
I've got
Brad,
it.
sorry, Norma.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, sorry. And again, my assumption is we are going with Plan A, right, not Plan B, when it comes to your drawings, because I know we had two of them.
It's the one that's got the great room closest to the pool.
Got it. Yeah. So that is actually the crux of my question, because you talked about the need to have a new bedroom for the new family. So I mean, honestly, if you didn't have a great room and you just had a single room there with a bath, you'd have plenty of space. So what is the compelling reason to get the great room in this? Because it seems like adding the great room is the reason why you're probably looking for the variance here.
So I don't know if you just heard Megan, basically 4 kids. We, for example, for the Super Bowl final, my eldest wanted to have some friends over, and we do have a very small basement. And unfortunately, we had to say no, because the family room, anybody who's down in the basement, you can hear everything upstairs. It's impossible for 2 adults, maybe to have some friends round, another couple round and relax, with 4 kids, and recognizing that's 4 kids without their friends. So, we've got a family that's growing, and we feel by being able to have another separate room that's detached sort of from where we want to be able to relax.
Excuse me.
It gives us
I
that
missed
space.
that. It cut out again.
So I don't know what you heard, but basically what I was saying was, with 4 children, as they start to want to have friends over, we really only have the family room. And if myself and Megan want to relax for the evening, it's impossible. The noise, there's nowhere for the kids to hang out. And we want to encourage that they have friends over. But at the same time, we need our own space. So we feel that great room will provide sort of separation from the children and their friends, and myself and Megan when we've got friends over, because we don't have a basement. We only have a crawl space. So, a lot of people have got the benefit of a basement where the kids can hang out downstairs, but we certainly want to encourage to have kids around and know what they're doing as they get older. But the present home, it's just not conducive with 4 kids and 4 kids that are going to, want to have friends coming over, as they're doing now, but certainly as they get older. So that's basically why we want to put on an extra room.
And Mr. Davis, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question. Do you only have a crawl space because of some unique characteristic relating to the property on which the house is built, a high water table, or some reason why a basement would have been impossible to build?
I honestly don't know. I mean, obviously the home originally was built in the 1950s. Quite a few of the homes going back towards Derby Paoli Road, they've been rebuilt, they've been knocked down. This was a home where they kept a lot of the original construction and then sort of remodeled it. So it is what it is. But I don't know the answer to that, no. Yeah, and it is a split level as well, as Megan just said.
Okay, sorry to jump in. Sorry to jump in, Brett.
No, it's quite all right. I guess the other thing I wanted to ask was, I mean, since you're doing construction work, did you give any credence to knocking down the existing family room and adding a second floor above that?
I mean, if you saw it, we've spent a lot of money recently on remodeling that family room. I just said, I mean, first of all, if you saw it, the family room is beautiful as is. And we've just spent quite a lot of money remodeling that family room anyway. So again, we would be sort of ripping out money that we've already invested. So no, that's not really I mean, we did both say that, if we'd have bought the home and we're remodeling what it originally was, that's probably a way they should have gone. But, what's gone, that water's sort of, well, that boat sailed, I guess, is what I want to say.
That addition, the ceilings are much higher than the rest of the home. So the ceilings in that room actually go up to the...
I'm sorry. I neglected to have you sworn in, Megan. I apologize. Norma, if you would kindly.
Okay, I won't talk. Sorry.
Megan, if you would raise your right hand.
I'm sorry.
You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yeah, I do.
And state your full name and spell it, please.
Oh, sure. It's Megan McAndrew, and it's M-E-G-A-N, and my last name is M-C-A-N-D-R-E-W.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, I just was chiming in that the ceilings are much higher in that addition great room that's there now, the family room. It's actually about, another 8 feet higher than the other ceiling. So we'd have to tear all that down and start over again. And that's the main reason why.
Okay, other questions, Brad?
I guess not right now. Not right now. I'm good.
Okay. George or Rich?
Yeah, I have a question. George, next. You said you had the approval from your neighbor. Is that the neighbor to which the addition is closest?
That's correct, but both neighbours actually provided a letter for me. They've seen the drawings and they both signed the same letter to say that they had no objection. and we're in favor of the addition. But to be honest, on one side, it doesn't affect them whatsoever because they can't see it. It's only Mr. and Mrs. Choi. And as I say, in the package, you should find both letters that were signed.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Davis, also as part of the proposal.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Megan just pointed out that we'd actually asked them if they could join this Zoom call, and no criticism, but we only got the Zoom details today, and so I didn't actually bother them. But they had offered to come on, and and just sort of confirm that what they put in that letter was still the case.
And is it also accurate that as part of the project, you're moving the driveway a bit closer to the children's?
Well, it actually get closer at one point. The way it was, the driveway straight as you go down, and then it veers off to the right. There probably would be a little bit of benefit if we could add an extra foot and a half, so that when we're backing out of the garage, there's just that little bit of extra space for turning. But we don't need it, but it would be beneficial, yes.
I wasn't offering it nor suggesting it. I just had a question about the plans that were presented.
Yes,
and actually, our action is based on the materials that you provided with the application. So to the extent relief were provided, it'd be solely limited to the requests that you've made and not any other things you might do. If you want to make other changes, obviously they need to get run through the township, and the township staff will make its determination of whether any relief is required. George, did you have anything else? I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Rich?
It's Richard Weitzman. I just wanted to make sure that I understand the variance that we're being asked to consider is the based on the 60-foot setback in the aggregate versus the 55 feet that's proposed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
John, I do have a question, sorry.
Sure, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, Norma's Brad. Hey, just a real quick question. On your floor plan A, you do have a notation at your existing 2-car garage that's optional to do a 4-foot garage extension. Are you going to be doing that?
I'd say not.
Say not. Okay, because remember, when we approve a variance, we generally say in accordance with the plans. So I think it needs to be clear, and you on the record, if it is or it isn't. And your testimony will obviously set the record straight. So unfortunately, I think you may have to let us know now.
I mean, am I better to say we'd like that option? Or, I mean, if it's going to go against
You can,
us,
and then you, yeah, if you say I'd like it, then you'll have the variance with that in there. You can always choose not to do it, but it's like you can't go back. You'd have to come back.
Yeah, I mean,
to
if
come
we
talk
could
to us.
ask for it, I mean, I think it's unlikely, but for sure, our garage, what we'd like to do is push one of the walls on the inside closer into the garage to create more space for like a utility room with a washer and the dryer. And
Sure.
It does make the garage quite small. We can still get 2 SUVs in, but it's tight. So that's why the architect proposed that. But it just looked like more cost and probably not a significant amount of benefit. But if we can include it,
Yeah.
I think it's worthwhile.
Okay. And John, I just have a real quick question for the solicitor, if I may. Just as I'm thinking about the potential that this could be considered de minimis, can you give me any guidance in terms of percentages of what is de minimis?
Well, I mean, in addition to the fact that it's a dimensional variance, and you have a relaxed standard, it's a request for a variance from the aggregate. So, right, each individual side meets the setbacks. It's the aggregate that you're looking at. There is no strict percentage. 5 feet would be pushing it, I think, to call it de minimis, but you certainly can deem it to be a de minimis request in light of the fact that it's the aggregate that they're looking to reduce.
Right. Okay, great, thank you.
And Brad, I had, Norma, it's John Riley. Brad, I had one question with respect to the optional 4-foot extension of the garage as well. I'm not certain, and it does not appear that the plans provide sufficient detail to indicate whether that extension extends into the setback.
Well,
It might not. The plans don't have the distance from the end of the optional extension to the property line. So I'm not able to tell whether that's in the setback. So I'm not certain whether they strictly need relief for that optional extension. But Mr. Davis, perhaps you know.
So, I mean, all I was going to say was that it wouldn't be encroaching. I mean, if it's based on the way it's drawn, it shows a 4-foot increase in length from the garage doors as they are right now. We would be in effect at 31 feet from the garage doors if we extended to the fence. So we'd be 1 foot less closer to the choice house than the rest of the extension would be.
Oh, okay. Okay. I now have my. I looked at this differently. Yes, Brad. The extension would also require relief. Sorry.
Yeah, but as I say, if it's going to cause a complication, I'd rather rule it out because I think it's unlikely that we will go down that route. But there is a benefit, but it's the cost that I think is prohibitive.
Great, John. I mean, again, the only question, I guess, the last question I have is, again, did you consider, let's say, getting rid of the new porch? Because that obviously could get you more internal space, and then trying to look to configure to maybe, because the other thing that we have to look at is this is the minimum relief necessary. So, like in our minds, you could say, well, if you went to 3 feet instead of 5, that might be, as we were talking about, more de minimis, so small that it may not really be that much of a factor in our analysis. So did you give any thought to that, as to maybe just getting rid of the new porch and instead enclosing that area so you have a bigger great room, and maybe then reconfiguring the bedroom and bath? I mean, again, I'm just throwing ideas. I'm just asking if you did, that's all.
I mean, the architect that came out, we explained what we were looking for, and he looked at all the options. I mean, what you're talking about, I mean, it certainly makes sense, but it doesn't make cost sense. And if we've got to start, in effect, taking down or demolishing part of the house that was remodeled only 4 years ago, and is sort of if you look at the way the porch flows to the deck and then the deck flows to the pool, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I think you may have misunderstood me. So, and I'll put up your picture. I'm referring to, let me see, this little porch right here.
Oh, okay.
That's
sorry.
Right. And enclosing that, because that gives you more internal space and more space to work with for reconfiguration. And stuff
sorry.
like that.
Okay.
That's all. That was my question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that porch will stay. I think the idea was that it would sort of be an exit point that would take us onto the hardscaping where the pergola is. So there'll definitely need to be some patio doors, French doors there, but whether it needs to sort of, as you say, be cut back, maybe not. So I agree, that would give us a little bit of extra space.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from members of the board? Okay, hearing none. Ian, have we received any questions via email?
I have not. If you probably have them in your email, or Kevin.
I have Kevin. I have not.
Okay. So there's nothing for the applicant to respond to that's raised by the any emails. So is there anything else Mr. Davis, that you'd like us to consider with respect to the application, or do you feel that your presentation is concluded at this point?
No, I mean, I don't think of anything to add other than it probably had, I mean, it clearly doesn't play into the code that exists, but I did actually put in the cover letter that the side where we want to obviously encroach on the property line, there's probably at least 42, 43 feet from the fence to Mr. and Mrs. Choi's garage. So that on their setback, the side that is where we want to put the extension, their setback there is significantly greater than the 25 feet. So the space between the two homes will still be, I think, conducive with what the township looks for in the area. But again, it's just a soft issue, but it does actually address the concerns about space.
Okay, thank you.
John, and the only other thing I would bring up
Go ahead, Gus.
is making the exhibits part of the record. If you want to mark it as all one, and
Yeah, I don't think we've made a whole lot of specific references to the items in the application. So I think what is probably easiest is to enter the application in whole, with the exception of the site plan, which is a separate document, because we're, to the extent relief is granted, we're going to want to have to make reference to the site plan. So the application and all of the other accompanying materials can be Exhibit A1, and then the site plan dated November the 3rd, 2019, prepared by RKW Engineering Services, will be identified as Exhibit 2, A2, excuse me. Okay, and Mr. Davis, would you like us to enter those materials into the record? You do, by the way.
Yes, please.
All right, well, we're happy to do that. There's going to be now, we've, since public participation is through email, through this medium, we've been informed that there's no questions via email. If I could ask you to put yourselves on mute now, I would ask whether any member of the board wishes to make a motion for consideration regarding this application.
So John, just so it's Norman Spratt. Just so I know, so there's so if someone wanted to get on the record, they would do it via email.
Yes,
is that how it is?
Or make prior arrangements in advance of this evening to be joined as a party. Yeah.
So if you haven't gotten an email, that means no one wants to come forward and either be for or against. Got it. Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure I was clear on that one. Thank you.
Brad, so you know this is being live streamed on YouTube, on the Township's YouTube channel. So residents are, if they want to, are watching this right now.
Those residents that have power.
Right. Those that are capable.
Okay. So would any member wish to make a motion to consider the application?
I'll make a motion to accept the relief requested in the application, in addition to the proposed but unexpected build out on the, I believe it was the garage.
So including the relief being granted would include, should the owner of the property wish to do it, the extension of the garage.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it. It's Rich Weitzman.
Okay. Is there any board discussion on the motion?
This is George Nagel. I think the fact that we have at least 25 feet on each side and we're only talking about the aggregate limit here, I'm not too embarrassed to argue that it is de minimis. It's 5 feet out of 60 feet. And I would vote to approve the application.
Yeah, just Brad, I'm in the same, I think, camp as George. I'm fitting this into the de minimis rule because I think otherwise hardship would be tough to find, and otherwise as well, there might be another configuration that might work that lessens it, but I think at 5 feet, it's no big deal.
It's Rich Weitzman. I'm inclined to agree. At 5 feet, it's pretty de minimis. At least it meets my definition of such.
Known as the Weitzman Rule. This is John Riley. I also agree that given the circumstances presented here, the reduction in the aggregate setback of 5 feet does constitute a de minimis exception as well. So I'll call the vote. Well, George, would you consider modifying your motion to include the grant on the basis of a de minimis variance as opposed to any other formal action that we would take?
Yes, I would. That's perfectly fine.
And Rich, would you second that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, hearing that, all in favor of the motion as revised to provide the applicant the relief requested on the basis of the relief constituting a de minimis variance, please, I'm going to do a roll call for Norma's benefit. Mr. Nagel, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. DeLizia, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Weitzman, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Mr. Riley votes yes as well. The vote being 4 in favor and none opposed. Thank you to the applicant for their time and willingness to park themselves in a parking lot in Wayne to participate this evening. And good luck with your project.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free to drop off. You pull up YouTube and catch the rest of our exciting proceedings.
We actually need to go home for a shower now. We're sweating.
All right. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Moving on to the next item on our agenda this evening, which is Appeal 3059. The applicant, the trustees of the University of Pennsylvania, the property located at 145 King of Prussia Road and zoned PLO Planned Laboratory Office. The applicant is requesting a variance from Section 280-123B of the zoning code to install a wall sign that will exceed 40 square feet in sign area and higher than 15 feet above the existing grade, and such other relief as deemed necessary by the board. Mr. Falcone, are you ready to proceed?
I think so.
Okay. Good evening.
Thank you both. It's good to see everyone, even virtually here. It's been a little while, so hope everybody's doing okay. As Mr. Riley explained, we are here on behalf of the trustees of the University of Pennsylvania for the property at 145 King of Prussia Road. What the applicant is seeking is the variance previously described to install one wall sign along the blue route towards the rear of the property on a parking garage. The sign being proposed exceeds what is permitted with respect to square feet and height. The proposed signage will be 81.5 square feet, which exceeds the 40 permitted, and will be approximately 51.5 feet above grade. Maybe a little more. We'll get that testimony from one of our witnesses, but it's 15 feet that are permitted for this type of a sign. We'll present
Dave, I'm sorry if I could interrupt for just one moment.
Sure.
I do want to take care of one other procedural matter. And Peter, if you're there we go. You're back on the screen. Peter, you're here representing the township in opposition to the application, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No problem. So we will have testimony tonight from our architect who's been with us from the beginning of this project, and as well as our sign consultant who put together our sign package and designed these signs. You'll hear from these consultants that the proposed signage is necessary for this type of an ambulatory care facility. You'll also hear, which I think is relevant, that the general signage for this applicant on its buildings is generally much more expansive. But with respect to this sign package, the applicant was sensitive to the township's code and did everything it could to propose signage that would be compliant. You'll note that no other relief is being sought for any other signage on the property with respect to this ambulatory care center. It's one sign, and it's at the rear of the property. It'll be the only signage that faces the Blue Route. You'll also hear testimony that none of the adjoining neighbors, any residential properties, will have any visual sign of this. It'll be directly towards the Blue Route and will be used for that purpose alone. You'll hear from our consultants that there are some natural features on the site that make this variance what it is tonight. The Blue Route sits above the grade of the property, making a 15-foot sign basically invisible from the Blue Route, as well as the setback from the road itself is hundreds of feet. You'll hear from our sign expert that given the speed of travel and the size of the sign, proposing one at 40 feet would not only be illegible, but ultimately dangerous. The applicant appeared before the Design Review Board in February of this year and received the recommendation for approval for the relief we're seeking tonight. We've pre-marked that recommendation in your exhibit packet, and I'll walk through those exhibits in a minute. If there are no questions for me, I'll get right into testimony just to see how we can get through this, but I'll highlight these exhibits for the board. And I think we had sent them in electronically. Some of them went in with the application originally, but the packet that we sent in just before the hearing this evening has them pre-marked in this order. So A1 is our application. A2 is a copy of the deed to the trustees. A3 is that Design Review Board letter dated February 12th, recommending approval. A4 is the exterior sign location plan. A5 is the design development plan. A6 shows the view from the Blue Route heading south. It's approximately 285 feet from the sign. A7 is the view from the Blue Route heading north. That's approximately 325 feet from the proposed sign. A8 shows permitted signage on the building heading south on the Blue Route. A9 is a series of pictures and diagrams, garage signs at different heights. A10 is a letter visibility chart that'll be used in reference from our from our design consultant. A11 is a photograph of another Penn Medicine facility in Tredyffrin Township that has virtually identical signage. And A12 is the CV of Renee Orr, who's going to be offering the testimony tonight for the design package. So again, if there's no questions for me, Mr. Riley, I'd like to get right to my first witness.
I'm sorry, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks. Peter, did you get a copy of the exhibits?
Excuse me. Shall I swear him in?
1 second, Norma.
No,
Okay.
he was asking a question of Peter Nelson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I actually do not have the exhibit.
Gus, did you send those to everyone or just me?
I only sent them to you. I didn't want to take the liberty of emailing.
Okay. Feel free to take the liberty.
Yeah,
I will. I'll do it right now. I'll take care of it right now.
Okay,
I
thanks.
do not have them either. This is Peter.
Yeah, many, we don't get until, and Mr. Falcone, correct me if I'm wrong here, we have A1 through A5.
That's correct.
And so then A6 through A12 are probably what are the additional items? Yeah, A6 through 12 are the additional items?
I think that's right, Mr. Riley. I know that Ian has them, and I've asked him for when we reference them, if he can pull them up on the screen so that folks can see them.
Okay,
So,
great.
They'll be available electronically. So
Okay, and
Eric,
in the
why don't you
Yeah,
turn
go-
on and we'll get you sworn?
I am on. Can you hear me?
We can. I can.
Okay. Sir, if you'll raise your right hand, please, I'll swear you in. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your full name and spell it for me, please.
Eric Swanson, ERIC SWANSON.
Thank you.
Ian, the first two exhibits we're going to be talking on are exhibits A4 and A5. Thank you. That's A4. Thanks, Ian. Eric, if you could please state and spell your name for the record.
I believe I just did that, but I can do it again if you want me
Yes,
to.
please.
Eric Swanson, ERIC Swanson, SWANSON.
And Eric, by whom are you employed?
I'm employed by Ballinger.
And what's your position with Ballinger?
I'm a senior principal.
And has Ballinger been engaged with this project from the beginning as the architect?
Yes,
And have you been chiefly assigned to the design of the building and the related structures here?
I have.
And you're familiar with the programming that the trustees are anticipating at this site, is that correct?
I am, yes.
And can you describe that programming briefly for the board?
Yes, briefly, it's an ambulatory care center. You're probably aware that's much more complicated than a medical office building. That is, it contains patient care activities like diagnostic and treatment, facilities for cancer care, for radiology, and for ambulatory surgery. So patients are here much longer than they are, and for more, for a typical medical office building. Most patients are, and they are undergoing more serious procedures and work.
And you've worked on projects and buildings like this in the past, is that correct?
Yes.
And with respect to these types of buildings and use and functionality, how important in the design process do you find signage to be?
Signage is very important for most projects, but in medical facilities, it's a big concern for patients primarily. It's a concern for our clients, but it's also a concern for patients. You probably all been to the doctor or to a medical facility, and I, for one, have a great deal of anxiety going there. So even if it's for a scheduled appointment and not for an emergency visit, this is, this doesn't have any emergency visits. It's all scheduled appointments, but still people are coming, as I said, for complex care, cancer, surgery, other sorts of procedures. And so there's a level of anxiety, and there's a need to, we give great deal of care to what we call wayfinding in the business. That's part of it is signage, but other parts of that are, really making people comfortable and about knowing where they are and where they're supposed to go, so that they don't have one other level of stress while they're visiting.
And if
So
we
it's a big concern.
Sorry. Yeah. If we look at Exhibit A4, which we have up on the screen now, that is what we've defined as the exterior sign location plan. Can you identify for the board and describe the proposed sign and the location there?
Yes, so you're looking at a site plan of with King of Prussia Road along the bottom. So the intersection with Route 30 would be to the right. And the main entrance drive there is at the center, or in the plan where there's like an AB sign. That's our signage on King of Prussia Road. The sign we're talking about tonight is the sign at the top of the page labeled A, location 5, the blue route, yes, exactly, the blue route sign. And then you can see slicing across the page there, sort of perpendicular to it, that is the blue route. So it's, yes, exactly. Thank you. So it's on the garage portion of the building. It's not on the building itself, but it is on the parking garage that is attached directly to the building.
And Eric, why was this location chosen for the signage?
Well, it is the most visible location from the blue route. And we want that for building identification, whether, you know, not just for the day of the visit where it can give direction for southbound traffic to take the exit that immediately follows this location, but it's also for going about day-to-day business. People know where the building is when they do need to visit it, so they identify it with this exit of the blue route. So it's the most visible part of the building to the blue route.
Ian, can we go to A5, please? Thank you. Eric, we've got up on the screen now Exhibit A5. Does this depict the signage as you understand it to be?
Yes.
And
well, as we would like it to be.
Right. And for the board's benefit, the graphic image at the top shows the location of the proposed sign at the top of the parking garage. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. And more or less from the blue route. Again, this was, we have other pictures later that sort of show it a little more realistically, but this was done in the design phase. And again, that is the closest part of the building to the blue route. So that seems to be the best best location for visibility of the sign.
And for clarification purposes, you're familiar with the township's signage requirements in the PLO, is that correct?
Yes.
And wall signs are not to be mounted more than 15 feet above the existing grade. That's your understanding?
That's right.
And do you know what the proposed height of this sign is?
I think it's about 51 something to the bottom of the sign and about 54 feet to the top of it from that low corner grade, there at the corner of the garage.
And if we
That's
go
the
to
maximum height.
If we go to Exhibit A6.
Yes.
We can see, thanks Ian for zooming in there, appreciate that. This is a view traveling south on the blue route, is that correct?
Right, yes.
And the image that you see here is the proposed Penn Medicine sign located at the identified height of 55 feet to the top, 51.5 to the bottom, is that correct?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And on the right side of the image, the trees that you see there, do they impact the view as you're coming up the blue route?
Yes, this particular view is the first vantage you really get heading south on the blue route. Before that, it's all trees. So you have this gap between the end of the trees here, and you can see where they begin again towards the exit. So it's a fairly narrow window that we have into the site. And
immediately in front, or I should say immediately after that second set of trees is when the driver would make would enter the exit lane to exit the blue route to attend this facility. Is that correct?
That's right. I think you can see it there in this photo right underneath the green sign.
So the window opens right when you get to where this car is in the image, where you can actually have an identifiable point of the signage, and then closes once you get to the next set of trees. Is that correct?
That's right.
And in addition to the trees, and it's difficult to see here, but are there other impediments that run in front of this building between the blue route and the building?
Yes, you can see it here, and you can see it again, and headed the other way. There are those utility poles that parallel the Norristown high-speed line that's also between the Blue Route and our building. And so they have a great deal of visual noise, both in this view, but also particularly in the northbound view.
And at this point, and Ballinger prepared this slide, the car traveling south would be approximately 285 feet from this sign. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's in the rightmost lane.
Right. And I would point out this is from the Google Earth cameras. So their cameras are mounted higher than what you are actually seeing as you from a driver's seat, probably 3 or 4 feet higher.
Understood. And just, I guess, for simplicity's sake of going through the exhibits, if we go to exhibit A7.
Mr. Falcone, could I ask a quick question while you're on that slide right there?
Absolutely.
It's Brad Delizia.
Absolutely, Brad.
Sure. So if you were at 15 feet or close to it, what level would you be on?
We actually have a slide that's going to hit that. We have a slide, Brad, that'll show just that.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, and I apologize. I did try to get the exhibits for you, but unfortunately it was maximum size for my email exchange. So hopefully I'll get it. John or Gus, if you could check your email and send it to a different email address, that'd be great.
Great. So we will get there for sure, Brad. Moving to A7, before we get to Brad's question, this is your view heading north on the Blue Route. This shows a more clear image of the impact of the power lines and power poles. Is that correct, Eric?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And this image, again, is, you prepared this slide about 325 feet from the sign. Is that correct?
Right. It's a Google Earth measurement, but yes.
And if we go to A8, here you go, Brad. So we actually have the proposed sign on the building on exhibit A8, correct, Eric?
Yes.
You can just see at the bottom left corner, right where the mouse is, the emblem of the trustees. That would be 15 feet. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, it's a little lower than 15. At 15 feet, it's really in the open air part of the garage, so there's nothing to mount it to at 15 feet. So it's a little bit lower. It's around 12.
So, Ian, if we could go to exhibit A9C, please. That's A9.
Yeah.
So this is not a picture image, Brad, but Eric, if we can describe A9C for the board, please.
Yeah, so what you're looking at is the elevation of the garage, and you can see the grade height there at its lowest point. That's it slopes up, the black line there, and then you can see where we could mount a Penn Medicine sign below 15 feet would be in that first band of precast, and it would be at a maximum height of 12 feet just because we couldn't go, there's no backdrop for it if we move it up to the allowable 15. And then the red line, dashed line that runs across there is more or less the height of the Blue Route. It has a little bit of slope to it, but that's more or less the height of the Blue Route in relationship to the garage elevations.
And Eric, looking back at exhibits A7 and A8, based on your testimony, is it your belief that signage located lower than the proposed 55 feet would be visible from the cars traveling north and south on the Blue Route?
No, it would not be visible.
And that's depicted on exhibits A8 and A7 as features impacting that visibility. Is that correct?
Yes, right. And again, I'm pointing out that the Google camera is higher than even your normal, what you see when you're driving. So it's only worse than these pictures show, these photos show.
And I mentioned briefly in my opening the applicant's general sign package. You're familiar with that sign package, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And when this applicant develops sites, is the sign package generally more extensive than we are seeking with respect to this building?
Generally, yes. I think you can look at Center City and see every healthcare system love signage, or I mean, need signage, want signage. So the packages are usually more substantial than what we're doing here, both in size and in height and number of locations.
When you were designing the current site and preparing a sign package, were you considering the township's ordinance and its requirements?
Of course, yes.
And as a result of what the township would require here, you designed a package that was generally compliant. Is that correct?
Except for this sign, yes.
Why did you choose this sign and this location to be non-compliant when the remainder of the building was compliant?
I think for the reasons we just stated, if we complied, it's not worth having a sign here. It would not be visible. It would not be effective. So the only place it really works is the topmost band precast on the garage that's as shown here.
Why not simply just eliminate the sign altogether?
I think it's important for patients to know where Penn Medicine Radnor is. We have patients coming from a distance. We're encouraging them actually to use the blue route so that they stay off local roads. So they are coming from both locations on the blue route. And whether or not it's for the day of and directions, particularly headed south, or whether it's just knowing where this building is for your future use, it's an important aspect.
Is it your opinion that it's necessary?
Yes.
If we turn to Exhibit A11, are you familiar with this site?
I am. It's not one I designed, but I know the building.
And can you describe for the board which building this is?
This is Penn Medicine Valley Forge in Tredyffrin Township near Route 252 and 202. So you can see there, I'm not sure which ramp this is. This is going on to 202, I believe. But you can see that typical signage, in this case on two sides of the building, that Penn Medicine and other health systems would typically have on their buildings.
And the signage, we're seeking this evening is similar in scale and scope to this, but in fact is only on one side of the building. Is that correct?
That's right.
Is there any other signage that the trustees are proposing facing the blue route?
No, none.
And it's your testimony that you believe many of the patrons to this ambulatory care facility will come from the blue route. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, wasn't the facility designed through the land development process to direct that traffic off the blue route to our site?
Yes.
And we've worked with PennDOT and the township to facilitate that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And you are familiar with the location of this building and this property, correct?
Yes.
You've been on site many times?
Yes, I have. Many times.
You're aware of the surrounding areas to this property, is that correct?
Yes.
Will this sign be visible from any residential properties abutting this site?
No.
To that end, will it have any detrimental impact on any of those surrounding properties?
I don't think so.
When you designed this signage, you took into consideration the topography of the site, is that correct?
Yes.
And you took into consideration the other factors you've discussed, such as the blue route, the setback, and the power lines, is that correct?
Yes.
And the applicant did not bring any of those items to this site, is that correct?
No, they did not. They were here.
Were you a part of the presentation to the design review board?
I was.
Can you describe the discussion with the design review board for the zoning hearing board?
Yes, it was very positive. We felt they thought they liked the signage package, the materials we're using.
Objection.
I'm going to grant that. I believe, Mr. Falcone, you've offered as an exhibit the decision of the design review board. Anything beyond that really is somewhat subjective characterization of what the design review board did. So I'm gonna sustain that objection.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
was that Mr. Nelson?
I'm sorry, Norma, that
Yeah.
was me sustaining the objection of Mr. Nelson. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Mr. Riley, I would like to ask this witness if he was instructed by the design review board to amend the signage before coming and submitting this application to the zoning hearing board. I think that's relevant. Generally, when you appear before a recommendation body, you take their recommendations and then adjust your applications accordingly. I think that's relevant and would not make its way into a recommendation letter.
Mr. Nelson?
I think strictly speaking, what the applicant needs to do here is to meet the 5 elements necessary to grant a variance. Design.
Peter, I couldn't hear you very well.
Better, Dave? Can you hear me, David?
I can. That's better. Thanks, Peter.
That's better.
Okay. I think it's not relevant in this case. Applicant's obligation here is to meet the 5 elements. One of those elements has nothing, isn't based on what the design review board instructed, said, commented. It has no bearing on whether or not they meet the elements.
But it is relevant in Radnor Township because they issue a recommendation. So it's no different than a planning commission recommendation. While they don't have authority, it's instructive to the applicant, and the applicant is instructed to take their feedback and apply it to their application. I'm certainly not going to die on this hill, but I think it's instructive as to whether or not the design review board, the board we were instructed to appear before for this signage, told us to change it before we came to this board. I think that's instructive. They could recommend the approval, which is great, and we're thrilled with that, which they've done. But the discussion that they had, we can get rid of all of the narrative, but were we instructed to modify it is very relevant.
I would say it has no relevance whatsoever as to whether or not this application meets the 5 elements necessary to be granted a requested variance.
I'm happy to withdraw it, Mr. Riley. I think we've got enough.
Thank you, Mr. Falcone.
Yeah. Mr. Swanson, I will ask if Exhibit A3 is a copy of the design review board letter recommending approval of this of the variances we're seeking. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I have no additional questions for Mr. Swanson. He's all yours, Peter.
Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, Mr. Falcone, you have another witness coming, correct?
I do. She will be offering testimony. She's the sign design consultant.
Okay, so all right. I think most of my questions should go to Mr. Swanson. So I'll try. If I ask something that's applicable to the second witness, I apologize. Just let me know.
I'll let you know, yeah, if she'll offer that testimony. Okay. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson, the property on King of Prussia Road is currently operational, correct?
Yes, just. And not fully, but some parts of it.
Right, and it's been operating for a couple months now?
No, only for a number of weeks, 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to confirm, so you're seeking variances to the height of the location of the sign and seeking a variance to the actual size, correct?
Yes.
And the height variance is so it's higher than the blue route, and the size variance is so it's readable from the blue route. That what you're arguing here?
Yes.
How much bigger is the proposed sign than the current banner that hangs in this location?
It's about the same size.
Ian, I emailed you. I'm sorry, I just did it. My exhibits. Do you want to put them up, or do you want me to try to share my screen? If you could put up Exhibit T1, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, just give me a moment to get those prepared. 1 second.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. Mr. Swanson, do you see the picture that I'm showing you as and marked as Exhibit T1?
Yes.
Okay, and just for the sake of the record, T1 is 3 pages of 3 photographs. The one we're looking at right now is page 1. And this is a banner that's currently on the building, correct, sir?
Yes.
And the sign you're proposing to install is approximately the same size as this banner. Is that your testimony?
I think the banners may be a little small. I don't know the exact dimensions of the banner.
Okay. Now, isn't it true that you could keep the readability of the sign, but make the sign smaller if you just made the message on the sign smaller, i.e., if you had a sign that said pen, wouldn't that be much closer to meeting the sign size requirements, but maintaining the same letter size, so therefore maintaining the same readability?
Yes, small. If it said just pen, it would be smaller.
And likewise, if you just had a sign that showed the what I call the shield, that would also be much smaller than what's being proposed here, correct?
It would be smaller, yes.
And Ian, if we could put up Exhibit T2, please. Here's a facility that uses just that shield. Is that correct, sir?
In conjunction with the sign next to it, yes.
But the shield certainly is the larger, more visible sign on this building at this location, correct?
Yes, obviously, yes.
And Ian, now could we go back to T1, please, and go to page 2? So this is a picture from Google from the southbound Blue Route showing the banner there. Do you see that, sir?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, I can't read it without my glasses on. Even then, I can't really read it, but yes, yeah.
And correct. I think a cursor, Ian's moving the cursor around where the sign is. And is this generally the same location as you were showing the sign in Exhibit A6?
It is, yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I believe in your testimony, you testified that if the sign was hung any lower on the parking garage, it would not be visible.
I said it wouldn't be visible from several vantage points. And the 15 feet especially is, you can't see where 15 feet is in this image.
But if you could move it down to the next solid portion of the parking garage, one level down, and it still would be visible from this vantage point, correct?
From this vantage point, not from many others.
And you could do that. You could even move it down in 2 or maybe even 3 levels and still be visible from this vantage point, correct?
If you're asking only about this vantage point, yes.
Ian, could we move to page 3 of Exhibit T1, please? And this is an image from northbound Blue Route. Is that correct, sir?
Yes. Yes.
And you can see the banner hanging on the building there in the background, correct, sir?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And from this vantage point, could the sign be moved lower?
I don't think so.
Why not?
You can see, well, see the power poles right there. It would be illegible.
And however, if the sign was just the shield, you really wouldn't need legibility. You just need recognition of that shield, correct, sir?
Even if it were the shield, I don't think I could read it.
Now, you could also, the Blue Route is not the only road frontage this building is on, correct, sir?
Right. It's also fronts King of Prussia Road.
And isn't it possible that you could hang a sign along that frontage where the sign would be compliant to the height regulations?
The only, we have a sign. It's not really on King of Prussia Road. It's all the way up at our entry canopy. It conforms to the 40 square feet and the 15-foot limit. It's well off King of Prussia Road. The closer parts of the building, actually at 15 feet, they're also obscured because of the topography that we have there. The park-like setting obscures the bottom portions of the building to make it look smaller.
Now you mentioned, and I think your sign, I think it's Exhibit A5, shows 4 other signs on the property, correct?
It does. The one sign is a directional sign only, and the other sign is really just a delivery sign, so people don't pull into it.
Peter,
That's
for the record,
service driveway. Yeah.
Sorry, Eric. For the record, Peter, that's A4, I think, shows all the different signage.
Is it A4? Okay.
A4, yeah. Thanks. Sorry about that.
Thanks, David.
And so the sign proposed, the 2 signs proposed to be right on King of Prussia Road. Is it your testimony that one is only showing where the service entrance is, and the other one is just a wayfinding sign?
The other one is the allowed, I've forgotten the name for it, and our signage consultant will remember. It's the sign at the entry that has certain dimensional requirements also. It just makes sure that you can turn into the sign,
Yeah. It's the main monument ID for the building.
Renee, Renee, you can't speak until you're sworn.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Renee, you can answer. I'll ask that question of you. You'll be able to answer that once you're sworn. And there you go. Yes. So we're now looking at. This is part of the plan that was sent in with the application, I believe, Exhibit A4.
Yes.
And so you have LOC1. That's a sign you were just talking about.
That's our main entry monument sign that as the building address sign that all addresses on King of Prussia Road or in this PLO zoning are allowed to have, and it's a maximum, no more than the maximum size. Yes.
And that sign does have Penn Medicines on it, correct?
It does. Yes. The only other building sign is the location 4, as you said. It's all the way back at the canopy, where you're dropping off.
And the only actual entrance to this property is at the entryway off of King of Prussia Road at location 1, correct?
That's right. Yes. The
And
only public entry.
Correct.
Location 2 is service entry. Yeah.
And there is a sign there also?
Yes. It just says service entrance or something. There, it's in the package. It does not say Penn Medicine. I don't think. I don't remember. Renee can talk more about that if you need.
Thank you. And you testified, I believe, that this sign was, to identify the building for patients, correct?
I did.
And you testified that the actual medical procedures that were occurring at this building are more complicated than you see at a lot of medical offices, correct?
Yes.
And there's no emergency care. Everyone who's coming here it has an appointment.
Yes, that's true.
You also said that one of the purposes of the sign, that's the subject sign of this application, was to provide guidance for people coming off the Blue Route?
From one direction on the Blue Route, yes.
Because going northbound, you're not going to see the building until you're well past the exit ramp,
No.
correct?
That's right. That's right. No, it's more, as I said, that's more so it's in your memory and you know where it is when you need it, when you need to be there.
So isn't it true in this day and age that the vast majority of people coming to this location are going to be guided via Google Maps or some sort of GPS?
I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, I object to that, Mr. Riley. Mr. Swanson can't speak to how people drive. Whether they use-
I'm going to sustain that objection.
Mr. Swanson, it's different these days now that we do have the GPS and Google Maps in finding locations than it was 30 years ago. Is that correct?
Again, I don't think Mr. Swanson is qualified to speak to the viability of Google Maps. This is signage. Is Mr. Nelson, are you suggesting there should be no signs, just handheld phones to get you where you're going?
Mr. Falcone, please. I think that the recast question is a question of general knowledge, and I'll permit it.
May I hear the question again?
That in this day and age, with the new technology, with GPSs and our phones having these applications such as Google Maps, that finding and going to new locations is a different exercise than it was even 20, 30 years ago.
For some people, for many, it isn't.
And
my brother, it's not.
And likewise, wayfinding signage is also less important because of the use of these applications and GPS devices, correct, sir?
I'm not going to speculate about that.
You beat me to it, Eric.
Isn't it true, sir, that even if you did see this sign on the Blue Route, that if you didn't know where you were going, it's basically almost too late to get over and get off, especially if you were in the left-hand lane driving with the flow of traffic?
I don't think I know that for a fact. It's fairly close, yes.
And just going back, so the patients that are coming to this site, they're people who have been referred to this site, correct, sir?
Explain what you mean.
Well, that they based on your testimony about the more complicated or intensive procedures that are occurring on this site, this is not the type of procedure that someone just calls up and says, hey, I'm going to have this procedure done. Usually you're referred by another doctor, maybe your regular doctor, your general practitioner. Isn't that correct, sir?
Usually, yes, maybe.
And isn't it correct, sir, that this site in Penn Medicine is a little different business model than a motel or a Wawa, as far as trying to get pass-through traffic into their location?
It's different than a Wawa, yes.
It's Mr. Swanson, right, sir?
It is.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was worried I forgot your name. Mr. Swanson, are you familiar with the other Penn building in this area that's further up King of Prussia Road?
On King of Prussia Road?
Yeah, if you continue up King of Prussia Road, it's on the opposite side, just past the high school.
No, the existing facility.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Have you?
That's the one they're moving. They're moving out.
Correct. Do you have any idea how long they've been in that building?
I don't know the exact number, and I believe it's more than 20 years.
And have you ever had the chance to see the outside of that existing building?
Have I seen the outside of the building?
Yes.
Yes.
Ian, can you move to or go to Exhibit T3, please? In front of you is Exhibit T3, Mr. Swanson, the first page. Do you recognize that building there?
I do, yes.
That's the existing building Penn Medicine is moving out of?
Yes.
Right. And in the foreground there, on the right-hand side, is a Penn Medicine sign, correct?
Yes, what I call the monument sign. Yes.
Monument sign. Is there any building sign that you could see in this picture?
None.
We move to page 2, Ian, please. This is another side of this same building, correct, sir?
Yes.
And there is no building sign to be seen on this photo either, sir.
There is not.
We move to page 3, please, Ian. And here's a third side of the building. No building sign to be seen, correct, sir?
Right.
And can we move to page 4, Ian, please? One more up, Ian, I think. There we go. And here's another side of the building, correct, sir?
This is within the property. This is not on King of Prussia Road.
Correct, yes. The building that's in this picture, the photograph, is the old Penn Medicine building moving out of, correct?
It is. Yes, it is. Right.
And it's hard to see in this picture, but is there a building sign over the entrance there, right, basically smack dab in the middle of the building?
Not that I can see from here.
Okay. Ian, can we go to the last page 5, the last page, please?
There it is.
There it is. Is this the only building sign on the old Penn Medicine building that you are aware of, sir?
I think so. Yeah, it's very similar to what we're putting on our canopy. The only sign we're putting on our building, other than the Blue Root sign, at our new canopy. Yes.
And like you said, Penn Medicine has been operating out of this building for 20 years without a larger building sign on it, correct?
That's right. It's a King of Prussia Road address. It's a little bit different. I think we're conforming to the same standards on King of Prussia Road.
And do you know, for the 20 plus years that Penn Medicine has been operating out of this building, if they had any sort of signage along the Blue Route directing people to this building?
No, they don't have any property that abuts the Blue Route.
Just 1 second. I believe I'm done, but let me just double check, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Swanson. I am done.
Okay, are there any questions from members of the board?
Mr. Riley, I actually have some redirect for Mr. Swanson.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks. So Eric, let's stay right on this series of slides here that Mr. Nelson's put together. Ian, can we go back to the first image here of the monument sign? So Mr. Swanson, you see this signage, correct?
I do, yes.
And Peter, I forget what number this is in your exhibit package, but for the record, can you clarify it?
It's T3, page 1.
Okay, and will it scroll through, Peter, 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's T3, pages 1 through 5.
Okay, thank you. So Eric, T3, image 1. This is an image provided by the township. We'll call this the rear of the existing Penn building. Is that correct?
That's right. This is Radnor Chester Road. There is another sign on King of Prussia Road.
Okay. So the rear of the building, similar to the rear of the proposed building, which abuts the Blue Route. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you'll see a series of images prepared by Mr. Nelson. And this, he has shown you, is the only real signage, monument signage, significant signage, and you've testified to that, for this building. Is that correct?
Are you asking me?
I am.
Oh, yeah. He asked me if this is the only signage. I had forgotten that this is Radnor Chester Road. I don't think we saw a picture of the monument sign on King of Prussia Road.
Is there a comparable monument on King of Prussia Road?
There is, yes.
And does this building front on both King of Prussia and Radnor Chester Road?
That's right, yes.
And on each of the two roads this building fronts, it has recognizable and readable signage, in your opinion?
Yes, it does.
You've testified here that we see on T3 sheet 1, there's no building signage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a topographical impediment to viewing this building?
No.
Is the monument sign that you see here viewable from Radnor Chester Road?
Yes.
Is it unimpeded viewing?
Yes.
And does the signage include legible letters and a shield?
Yes.
As we move around the building, can we go to T3 sheet 2? There's no signage there, correct?
None that I see.
But as we move further down,
Further, yeah.
the next image, please, Ian. That is, I believe, continuing further down King of Prussia Road. No building signage, correct?
Right.
But there is no topographical impediment to viewing the building or any monument sign. Is that correct?
Right.
And is it your testimony, Mr. Swanson, that as you move further down King of Prussia Road, there is an additional monument sign?
There is. That's the main entrance, main patient entrance, and that's where there's the monument sign.
And it's viewable from King of Prussia Road at the access point to the building?
Yes.
And then can we, Ian, go to the next slide, please? We saw this. This is interior, you testified, to existing Penn Medicine, correct?
Yes.
And then the next slide, please, Ian. I think it's T3 image 5. This is compliant signage at the entrance door to existing Penn. Is that correct?
Yes.
If we go back, Ian, I'm sorry about this. If we can go back to Exhibit A4 in my package, we see a sign plan, a diagram, correct, of the signs we are proposing for existing Penn Medicine.
Yes.
And we have a building that essentially fronts on 2 roads. Is that correct?
Yes, King of Prussia and the Blue Route.
And if we had placed conforming signage on the Blue Route side of our frontage, as we did with existing Penn Med, would it be visible?
No.
Would it be useful?
No.
But on existing Penn Medicine, we do show and have signage that would be comparable in location and use to our proposed signage. Is that correct?
That's right. There are signs on the 2 roads which the building fronts.
And
Legible.
Because there is no topographical concern at existing Penn Medicine, we are able to propose and have conforming signage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ian, can we go back to Township Exhibit T1, please? Mr. Swanson, you were asked to offer testimony on this exhibit. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Nelson asked you whether there would be any impediment to signage at the lower level below where we're proposing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you believe there's an impediment when looking at the township's exhibit to viewing that sign?
Yeah, there's a wire running through that.
And even as we move lower, is there continued impediment to clean viewing of the sign?
There's a tree, yes, and additional wires.
And if we could go to the next image, please. As you pull away from that signage, is it your position, this is again the township's exhibit, do you believe it becomes easier or more difficult to read on the lower 3 levels that the township's showing you here?
It's more difficult.
Can we go to the next image, please? This is traveling north on the Blue Route, correct?
Yes.
Is it your testimony using the township's exhibit that a sign would be legible on the 3 lower partitions of the parking garage?
No, it would not be legible on the 3 lower ones.
You were also asked about patients visiting this facility, correct?
I was.
You were asked to testify whether or not, because it was a medical facility different from that of a Wawa, people would be more familiar with the location and access. Was that the line of questioning you were given by Mr. Nelson?
I wasn't too clear about what the questioning was. It was about, is it like a Wawa? It's not, is what I said.
Is it possible in this industry, given your experience in designing these buildings and working with the University of Pennsylvania, that in fact there will be specialists that operate out of this ambulatory care facility?
Yes.
And that you could be referred to this facility to receive specialized treatments such as cancer care?
Yes.
And it's possible that you would have no other reason or inclination to attend this facility or visit this facility but for that individual referral.
Right.
And it's very possible that following that referral and the treatment at this facility, you might not return. Is that correct?
That would be, that's true, yes.
And it's also possible that this isn't, well, for the record, this is an outpatient surgery center as well, correct?
Yes.
And not all Penn facilities are outpatient surgery centers, is that correct?
That's right.
Medical offices.
Right.
So it's possible that your doctor does not perform outpatient surgery in his or her office, and you would be referred to this facility for the first time.
That's right.
You were asked some questions about the importance of signage in today's era of using the phone. Is that correct?
I was.
You were instructed to answer one general knowledge question as to whether or not signage was generally necessary given that people use their phones and their apps. Do you recall that question?
I do.
Is it your belief in your design of these facilities, not just this one, but others, not just for this applicant, but for others, that signage is important and remains an important part of your design process?
It is. Still an important part.
And you work closely with the trustees of the University of Pennsylvania, do you not?
I do.
And they advise you as to what should and should not be a part of your design, is that correct?
Yes.
And that instructs the way you design their facilities?
Yes.
Have they ever instructed you to avoid using signage because there's no more need for it in today's modern technology?
Never.
Have they
No.
instructed you in this particular instance that the subject sign of this application is an important part of their program and delivering their services to their patients?
Yes.
And they've instructed you to come tonight and seek this variance. Is that correct?
That's
Section,
yes.
the applicant's leading the witness.
I'm sorry?
You're leading the witness, Dave.
It's redirect.
It's redirect, but you still can't lead the witness.
In this forum, Peter, I disagree.
Mr. Falcone, is there perhaps a way you can rephrase that question?
Were you instructed, I will, Mr. Riley. Eric,
Thank you.
were you instructed by the trustees as to the importance of this sign?
Yes. But yes, my client believes the sign is important.
I have no additional questions for Mr. Swanson.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members of the board, please?
Yeah, I just have one question, Brad Lizzie. If you could refer to
Excuse me,
A4
excuse
for
me, excuse me. Can we get a gallery view?
Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go. Great. Oh, shoot. I wanted to go to A4, though. But maybe we can just reference A4. And you have 5 circles, I guess. Just describe to me AB. So I assume that A, when you have those 4 circles that have the AB nomenclature, or 3 of them that have AB nomenclature, and then one just says A, I assume that means that there is the pen shield and the pen name. What does B represent?
It means it's on both sides.
Again, it means it's on both sides. Okay.
Yeah,
So
if it has only one letter, it's a single-sided sign.
Okay, got it. But and it's the same same information
message
on both sides.
Same message both sides. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just so I get this right, so the existing building has 3 signage, 2 on the street, 1 over an entrance. Here you have 1 over the entrance and 3 on the street for reference here.
The one is the service entrance to for clarity for both patients and for service. It has that's all it's doing. The other one is just a directional sign that is halfway up our drive that says continue straight ahead. It's a very small sign that says continue straight ahead for patient drop off. And there will be additional properties to the left that we'll have. So, that's
but it does have does it have the logo on it and the name Penn Medicine? And all 3 signs.
I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'll have to look.
Okay. Again, I'm just trying to get clarity in terms of how many areas on your building where someone is conceivably driving by where they could see something that says Penn on it, so they know where to go. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Those small signs aren't in this package. tonight, so Renee may remember, but they're very tiny. They're not about. They're not advertised. They're not saying Penn Medicine.
They're not saying Penn Medicine.
I'm going to let Renee. I'm going to let Renee answer that.
So again, Renee, I'll ask you the question once you're sworn in the testimony. That was the only question I had.
It does not say Penn. The small ones do not say. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let's let Renee do it. If she's the design, we'll have her do it.
Yes, that's fine.
That was my only question.
Yeah. Thanks.
George or Rich, do you have?
This is George Nagel. I had the same question from A4. Maybe I'm confused now based on what I just heard. It looks like there's 2 signs on King of Prussia Road.
Yeah, and again, Renee can go into this. The one sign says service entrance deliveries only.
And it doesn't say anything about Penn?
It has a small Penn Medicine on it. It does, yes.
Do you know what the other sign says? Or we're just waiting?
What the other sign? The other sign is the monument sign that is Penn Medicine main entrance, patient parking, 155 King of Prussia Road, the main monument sign.
If somebody's driving down King of Prussia Road, they pass these signs, is there any chance of confusion that they don't know this is Penn Medicine? Well, I'll answer my own question. I don't think there is.
On King of Prussia Road, we hope not.
Road, yeah.
But, yeah, right.
And that's the entrance to the facility. The entrance to the facility is not off the Blue Route.
The property adjoins the Blue Route, but yes, the entrance, the drive-in entrance is from King of Prussia Road.
Okay, thank you.
John, I did have one other question, and I apologize. I wrote it down. I forgot to mention it. But Council, you brought in A11. Just for argument's sake, was there a variance involved in that signage in A11? Or was that by right? Because that is relevant.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I don't know whether there was a variance involved in that application. I didn't represent Penn in that application, so I can't speak to that.
So it's entirely possible that they could do that by right, and so since they could, they did, as opposed to it being in reference to being able to see it off of a highway or at a certain height or trying to get around trees that I think they planted themselves or something like that. So okay, that's great. If you don't know the answer, that gives me clarity. Now I'm done, John. Sorry.
Quite all right, Brad. Rich, do you have any questions?
No, I'll hold my question.
Okay, I've got a couple questions and I've been scribbling them as we've been going, so bear with me as I find them. One question, and Mr. Swanson, I apologize if this is slightly beyond what your participation in the overall project has been, but I believe the testimony has been that you have been involved in this project through, from commencement, or perhaps from commencement through where we find ourselves today. Is that correct?
Yes, I have been.
Okay. Does the applicant have expectations as to where its customers, its patients, are going to be coming from? Namely, from what directions they can expect to have patients visit them? Will they be on Lancaster Avenue? I'm sorry.
I haven't seen any recent data. I know when they surveyed where existing patients come from, they do come from many directions. Both they on the Blue Route from both directions. Certainly, a lot of people come on Lancaster Avenue, but I don't know the numbers.
Okay. Is it fair to say, though, that the only patients that will see this, the only patients that are coming for treatment at this facility that will see the sign that we're talking about are those patients that are traveling south on the Blue Ridge.
If you're talking about the day of treatment, yes.
Which I am.
Okay, yes.
Okay. So for northbound 476 travelers, this is a very nice billboard, correct? Okay, that's a characterization. Let me rephrase that. It is there for purposes other than directing patients to the facility for treatment on the day of treatment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have a question which perhaps would be interesting to hear your thoughts on, but also may be more for council. And that is, obviously the application proceeds from an assumption that the applicant has a right to put the sign on the building at all. Is it the applicant's position that 28123B provides the applicant the right to put a wall sign on a building which is not used solely for office purposes? Because that's what 28123B says. And there is ample testimony that we've heard this evening that this facility is clearly used for many, many purposes. There may be some medical office aspect to it, I don't know. But there's certainly uses of the facility that go beyond an office use. Is that correct?
Yes.
So explain to me the presumption that the applicant is entitled to put this sign on the wall at all.
So I can
David,
speak to
I'll
that. I
refer
think,
to you.
yeah, John, you had said it could be a better question for council, and I think it is. I think the zoning ordinance permits wall signage, and one sign is permitted per wall facade. And this is a wall of a medical office ambulatory care building. A portion of this building is medical office. That's the nature of the ambulatory care component. In the township's ordinance, before the amendment of the PLO, the ambulatory care facility would have been classified as a medical office. There was no distinction between hospital and medical office. It was either a hospital or it was a medical office. So one of the things we had to do when we were proposing this ordinance change was create the distinction between office, hospital, and then ultimately ambulatory care. And as part of that process, and as part of the discussion with the township, the ambulatory care facility was permitted to include a percentage of medical office. But the distinction was there was a cap on the different services that could be provided. So there is, if you go by the concept that only that which is specifically stated to have this sign in the ordinance, ambulatory care facilities don't otherwise exist and would not be permitted to have any signage.
Okay, thank you. And the question that we got from counsel for the township with respect to the differences between this facility and a Wawa, I think I can imagine that there are differences, but I think the intent of the question is perhaps the difference between, walk-in or occasional or opportunistic visits to the facility and the more scheduled 6 to 8 weeks, months, whatever it takes to get an appointment, an event that is scheduled far in advance and the visit is for an individual purpose. Is it your belief that the sign helps that very occasional visitor find the location if they happen to be traveling south on 476? Or do you acknowledge that there are perhaps more important uses for that sign than simply assisting a patient on the day of treatment?
Identification of the building is very important. I think still for people who will know that when they drive by, they'll say, oh, that's where that place is. And when they need to be there, then they just have a lot more comfort about how to get there.
Okay. Okay. I don't have any further questions. Board members, any other questions? Okay.
Mr. Riley, I have a few questions of redirect.
You had a shot at redirect earlier. Has there been other cross that you're redirecting on since you asked those questions?
It is. It's two of the questions you asked, Mr. Swanson.
I don't know that redirect is appropriate on the basis of a question that I asked or any other board member asked. I think it's more appropriately directed toward questions that other parties might ask.
So I think you've elicited testimony from the witness that was not part of his direct examination, and I'd like to flesh it out. I think that's appropriate following your questions. But if not, I can certainly get it. I can get it from Renee if you'd prefer.
Yeah, why don't you get it from your next witness?
Okay.
Okay, I believe we're done with Mr. Swanson. Thank you very much. Your next witness, Mr. Falcone.
Renee, can you turn on?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
I could just remind everyone else to mute whoever else is going to testify.
It's not.
Okay, Norma?
Yes. Renee, I can't see your picture, but if you'll raise your right hand.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to get my system preferences to work. Okay, yes.
You do solemnly swear or affirm that testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Thank you. And state your full name and spell it for me, please.
Renee Orr, RENAEORR.
Thank you.
Are we going to wait for Renee to get video, or should we just go with the audio at this point?
It looks like it says it's saying I'll have to quit Zoom in order to access my camera. So is it okay if I'm not?
Audio is going to be fine.
Okay.
Audio will be fine.
Thank you. Renee, can you please identify by whom you're employed?
It's actually my company. It's Delve.
I'm sorry?
Delve, DELVE. To dive into. There you go.
And how long have you been with that company?
Since 2011, so 9 years.
And what does your company do?
We do signage design and planning and graphic design.
And what's your role with that company?
Principal and senior designer.
And you are a founder of the company, is that correct?
Yes.
And how long have you worked in the sign industry?
14 years.
And can you please describe for the board the general background educationally and professionally in the industry?
Yeah, I have a degree in specialized technology, which is graphic design.
Excuse me. Please
yes.
Slow down. Let me just turn your volume down a little bit. Hold on. You're very loud for me, so just give me a moment here.
Sorry. Yep.
I wish I could do that with my son.
Okay, so repeat that and nice and slowly.
Yes. Sure. I have a degree in graphic design, and my background is when I was working for other employers, when I started out in the industry, was working for firms like Exit in Philadelphia, who predominantly work with healthcare clients. Before that, I was with.
I'm sorry. Exit? What are you saying? I can't hear you. EXIT.
Yeah, Exit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was the name of the firm. And from there, I left and started my own company with a partner. And we do signage design and planning. And we've worked with the National Park Service, SEPTA, museums. We've worked in a lot of different fields in terms of types of clients. I also have ongoing work with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, so I have run quite the gambit of who my clients are.
And Renee, your experience is in the design and implementation of signage, is that correct?
It is the design and the planning and creating the documents necessary for them to be implemented by a fabricator like AGS, who is actually the prime. I'm a sub under them as a design build project. That's what this is.
And you've just noted,
so
you've noted that in your experience, you frequently work with healthcare facilities and providing signage for those facilities.
Yes.
So I'm going to offer Renee as an expert in design, and I'm sorry, Renee, not implementation, but design and
planning.
And planning.
Yeah.
With respect to signage.
Correct.
Without objection.
Thank you. Renee, can you please describe for the board why you were engaged by the applicant on this project?
Sure. It's pretty typical for these sorts of projects of this magnitude to outsource the signage planning and design to a consultant. So AGS and I partnered to develop the plan and the necessary documents for sign location, content, materials, and those sorts of things. And then, AGS would then fabricate and install them. So we were hired to make sure that those elements, both the interior, exterior, and garage signage, would be complete and adequate for the site.
And you've been chiefly responsible for that design, is that correct?
For the design, yes.
And you're familiar with the property, is that correct?
Yes.
And you visited the location?
Yes.
And you've heard the testimony that Mr. Swanson offered tonight, have you not?
Yes.
In addition to the purposes that Eric talked about for signage, from your perspective, in facilities like this, in your expertise, why do medical facilities have signage?
Because you have to. Even though people might be able to find their way to a site, we still need to know that we've arrived there or that we are close to arriving there. And it's important, if we are able to see a building, that we can identify it when it's visible. So whether that means that you're approaching on the street and there's a monument sign, you've identified it. You can see the building, it's being identified. So it's just something that has to happen. When you're looking at a main entrance point or a main road or a parking lot, you need to identify it. Or else you're gonna have people turning around and just generally confused.
And it's your position that the signage that this applicant is proposing is in furtherance of those purposes?
Yes.
One of the questions we heard earlier tonight dealt with traveling northbound and southbound on the Blue Route. Do you recall that testimony?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's our position, and well, I should ask, did you design signage to be directional for cars traveling south on the Blue Route?
Directional?
As in,
no, there's no.
So by directional, identifying the building before an exit to access the building, heading south.
Yes, I would call that more of a placemaking element. So you could say it's wayfinding. It's not necessarily direction giving, but it's identifying the building as a place.
Sorry, wayfinding.
You see it happen quite. Yeah, yeah.
I apologize.
So, yeah.
Wayfinding would have been.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, fine. Now, wayfinding, the intent of the sign heading north is not so much wayfinding. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when the applicant approached you as part of their design team, there was an opportunity and a wall available to propose a sign heading north on the Blue Route, had they chosen to do so, was there not?
Yeah.
And we can see that if we turn to Exhibit A5. Ian, are you able to get to our exhibits?
Yeah, can we?
So we see here on Exhibit A5, Renee, the top image. There is no sign proposed on the opposite side of the wall from the proposed sign. Is that correct?
Correct.
Similar to the one that you saw on the exhibit we marked for the Tredyffrin building. Is that correct?
Correct. Where they signed both visible sides of the building, yes.
And is it your belief that the decision, let me step back so as to not lead you. Why did they not put a sign heading north that would be wayfinding?
Well, we're being sensitive to, you know, what the zoning outline we were allowed to have. We wanted to make sure that we stayed within as many parameters as we could. Signing that other side doesn't serve as much of a purpose because there's no decision to be made after you would pass that. That would be pure advertising. However, coming the other direction is not only an identification moment, but also a wayfinding moment. And then we felt that was more valuable.
So is it then your testimony that perhaps signage directed towards the northbound traffic would be billboard type signage?
Yes.
And
it would be more advertising that, hey, we're here, than it would be serving a wayfinding or direction giving purpose.
And the applicant felt that not necessary?
No, if we have some kind of identification here, no, having both sides is not necessary. The side that we're showing here in this exhibit is what we feel is necessary.
But is it desirable?
To have both?
Yes.
I mean, I would say yes, that would be desirable.
Again, not necessary.
Not if we have the other sign that we're showing in this exhibit.
So Mr. Swanson described the sign generally and identified its location. We've gone back and forth on that exhibit a few times. I don't think I will, but is it your testimony, having seen Exhibit A4, that is the sign package you've worked on with respect to this site?
Yes.
And you've just offered testimony, but you did consider the township's zoning ordinance when you were designing the signs for this project. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when you were designing the signs here, and specifically the sign that is the subject of this application, did you consider the natural features on the property?
Yes.
And what are some of those natural features that you considered?
The elevation of the building compared to the surroundings, the plantings, the utility lines, the distance from 476. We looked at several locations. We did a lot of communicating and planning on this, and what we're showing here is where we felt, after looking at several different iterations, it made the most sense, and it was the safest approach, and it was the most effective approach.
And the bulk of Mr. Swanson's testimony dealt with height, which speaks to one of the variances we're seeking tonight, which is to place the sign higher than 15 feet. But there's a second variance that we're seeking. We've talked a little bit about it, but it has to do with the size of the sign. Are you familiar with the township's requirements with respect to size of signage?
Yes. Yes, we followed that with the canopy sign that we did for the entrance, which is the 40 square feet maximum.
And the proposed sign exceeds that maximum, is that correct?
Correct.
How big is the proposed sign?
It's it's just under 82 square feet. I think it's 81 and a half square feet. Yeah.
And if you go to exhibit A9B,
yeah.
Does this exhibit help detail the size of the sign and how it's measured?
Yes.
And could you explain to the board how we calculate area of sign, whether it's just the letter height? Do you draw a box? Can you explain for them how that's done?
Yeah. So these are cut letters, so they are dimensional letters. So you still have to take in the negative space. So with this drawing, you can see that the box is drawn from the highest point from the top, bottom, left, and right. So we're going from the top of the D to the bottom of the shield, and from the left of the shield to the right of the last E in medicine. So that entire box is what we're using to calculate the signage square footage. So essentially it captures every element. Nothing is outside of that box. It's every element that sign includes.
You saw the
so while the
you saw the exhibit offered by the township earlier, which was a picture of the existing banner that's up on top of the building.
Yeah.
You recall that exhibit?
Yes.
And the exhibit showed I'm calling it a banner, I don't know what else to call it, but a banner that was white with printed lettering and a shield on it. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And does that banner give a general idea of how the sign itself is measured, the entire white area, as opposed to just the letters?
Well, that's actually tricky. If we were to hang a white sign, it would be calculated by the entire white field. So if we hung a white box up there with a smaller logo centered inside that box, the sign would be larger. Does that make sense? Here, we're just going right to the edge of where those cut letters end. If we wanted to put a white field around that, what you were seeing here, the square footage would actually have to get larger to allow a little bit of a white border around the sign.
But you're talking about a border around the outside, the right and left edge of the sign, but the area in the middle would all be white. Is that correct?
Correct.
And in this instance, we are not proposing signage with a solid back. We are proposing signage with individual lettering and a shield. Is that correct?
Correct.
But yet we are calculating our area based on a notion that the entire picture would in fact be that white background that was
correct.
shown.
All the negative space is also included. Yes.
And as we look at the calculation of sign size and the impact that it has, it certainly has some impact based on how high the sign is. Is that correct?
Yes, among other things, yes.
In addition, what other characteristics of this location are relevant to the size of the sign we're proposing, other than the height?
Could you go to the exhibit, I'm not sure which one it was, showing the view from the Blue Route?
Heading
I think it clearly, yes.
A6?
Yes, right here, A8 actually. Let's go to A8 because I think this is a good, just to quickly look at this. So your question of being what other factors, so here you can see, like we've already talked quite a lot about is the obstructions with the vegetation, the utility lines. A big factor here is we have 3 lanes of traffic, a rate of speed at 55 miles an hour, and an opportunity of 3 seconds or probably closer to 2, where a person has unobstructed view to quickly take a second glance and get back to the road. That's the amount of time they really have to look at something, get their attention back to driving, and comprehend what they saw. That's a very, very small window of opportunity. So we're looking at a lot of constraints, and that will drive where it needs to be positioned and how large the letters should be, so that it's safe for drivers. They don't have to linger on it and squint and go, what does that say? Oh, okay, it's the Penn Medicine logo. They need to be able to see that safely and get their attention back to the road.
And we've marked as Exhibit A10 a letter visibility and viewing ranges exhibit. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're familiar with this exhibit?
Yes, yes. I'm familiar with the purpose it serves, yes.
And can you explain and describe for the board what A10 does for you as a sign designer?
Yeah, sure. So A10 is a starting point for the investigation of determining how large a letter height needs to be for a sign. There's a lot of other factors that go into it, but this is just kind of illustrating how complex this can be. I use other calculators as well. This is almost saying your best case scenario, completely flat road, nothing obstructing you. The sign is right next to the road. And this is how large your cap height needs to be for your sign at this speed. Now you have to take other things into consideration. This doesn't really take into consideration shorter viewing windows in terms of how much time you actually have to see the sign. It doesn't take into consideration lanes of traffic, but this is a starting point, and this is kind of how complex it can get. And there's been a lot of studies done on this that designers use to give them a good idea of where they need to start before they just start doing renderings and site studies and things like that.
And Renee, a lot of this is dependent on the character size, again, and your max viewing distance. So for this to be relevant for our testimony tonight, I think it's important to know how tall are the letters, the characters in our sign. Obviously they vary, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about how they vary, but the left-hand column.
Yeah, so it might be, so we're suggesting between the 24 and the 36. So you're saying your maximum viewing time at 55 miles an hour is, we'll say 10 seconds. That's 10 seconds that is unobstructed. We don't have that. We have 3. So again, this is a starting point, and this is saying from, you can see this, if you have 720 feet, you'll see the sign. We don't have 720 feet. We had to get a little bit more complex with these calculations than just what this chart suggests. So again, like I said, this is a starting point for best practices, but it helps you get an idea of where you need to land.
And I probably should have asked you earlier, but what's the speed limit on this area of the blue route?
It's 55 miles per hour. 55
miles per hour. And you note that we're proposing letters that fall between the 24 and 36 inch character size. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's we're suggesting it's actually illustrated on the previous exhibit. I have it written in my notes. I don't have it right in front of me. The cap height.
A9B.
Yes. So we are, the cap height of the Penn Medicine, we're looking at 31 inches in height, with the lowercase being about 20 inches for the lowercase letters. And this is actually, the banner is a little deceiving because the proportions are different. The shield is very large on that banner, and Penn Medicine is very small with the banner that's there now. So it's a little larger than what we're suggesting here for the permanent sign.
When you say
the banner
what's there now, are you referencing the white banner that's hanging today?
Yes. Yes.
And some of the other criteria you consider is distance from the sign. Is that not correct?
Yes, distance and also setback. So a sign right next to a road is going to be much more easily read and legible and comprehended than a sign that has a setback of 150 to 200 feet from the road in terms of letter heights. A typical highway sign can have letter heights that range from 8 inches to 18 inches. Icons can be up to 36 inches, and they're right next to the road.
And for the cars traveling south, which we've shown that our primary target for this signage, how far are those cars approximately set back from this signage?
Based on the vantage point that we have in our exhibits of the 285 feet, I'm not sure exactly at what point, what car, like, are you saying exactly across from, like when you're almost right at that sign? I'm not sure exactly.
I'm talking about as we show on exhibit A6.
Okay.
From that inside lane to the signage. Are we showing that at approximately 285 feet?
Well, I mean, from where the camera is to that sign, that's what I believe, yes, 285 feet.
And based upon the data that you've just testified to and the information you have for this site, have you designed letters that you believe would be the minimum necessary in height to be safely legible for a car traveling south on the Blue Route?
Yes, it is exactly minimum safely legible without causing drivers to slow down or to divert their attention away for an unsafe amount of time from the road.
Is it your belief that when you install signage that is not appropriately sized, that it could create a hazard?
Yes, and it can, yes.
And why is
create
that?
More. What I was sort of saying before, when people, if something's not large enough, people tend to linger on it because they're trying to read it. People have a natural, they see something, they're curious, they want to read it. And if something's not quickly legible or designed at a proper size, or designed to a size that's appropriate for, like I said, this is a 3-lane highway. We need to make sure if anything is there, that it is designed appropriately so people aren't distracted. We don't want to distract anybody. We don't want people taking any attention away that is longer than 1 second from what they're doing, driving.
And while you've done a lot of your work in the healthcare field, you've designed signs for various industries, is that correct?
Yes.
And a healthcare facility like this ambulatory care facility, is it, in your opinion, distinct from that of a Wawa or Royal Farms?
Yes, because Wawas and other entities like that, they have a multitude of branding guidelines that they adhere by. So even without logos like Wawa or what have you, you could identify a building based on the color schemes or the general architecture. A Taco Bell looks like a Taco Bell. You could probably guess it without the sign out front. So they have layers of identification and branding that happen. Predominantly with healthcare, you see a lot of retrofits into spaces that because of that, or even, this building, it's not that every single Penn Medicine campus looks exactly the same. They rely on their branding to brand their site. They're not relying on materials and color and the shape of the building and those sorts of things. So they really rely on their branding to identify their spaces.
And looking at the entirety of the sign package for this site, there are 2 signs along King of Prussia Road, correct?
Correct.
And the first sign we were asked some questions about, Mr. Swanson was, is the service entrance. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it your understanding that the service drive is meant to serve only those in the service industry and not patients?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We needed that sign there so that we didn't have patients turning into that area. It's just deliveries and for service. That is it. Yeah.
There's no patient access off of that road. Is that correct?
Correct.
Moving further up the road to the second and primary entrance, the monument sign. What's the purpose of that sign?
That is the main entrance to the property for the facility. So that is where people will be turning in, visitors and patients, to access the parking garage or the drop-off.
Are there natural slopes in the front of this building?
Yes.
And from King of Prussia Road, are you able to view building signage at the entrance to this building?
No.
From the two roads that abut this facility, how many signs has the applicant proposed that are visible from the road?
From King of Prussia Road?
From any road. Building
From
signage.
any road, building signage. I don't think any building mounted signage would be visible from King of Prussia or any, no, it wouldn't be visible.
So there's no building signage that's visible from King of Prussia Road?
No, the monument sign serves as our ID for the road.
And there is building signage, however, viewable from the Blue Route.
Well, what we're proposing here.
Right.
But no,
That's
there
the
is
question.
currently there is nothing visible from the Blue Route.
But the signage that we're proposing is the building signage that we're speaking of.
Yes.
And you would consider it the only building identification signage that's viewable from off the property?
Yes. The sign that we have at the canopy, I consider as a sign designer to not really be a building ID, but as an entrance ID. It's how it's mounted, where it's mounted. It's really for people walking into that main entrance, so that they know that that's the main entrance from the outside.
Is there signage proposed along Route 30?
No.
Do you believe, based on your understanding of this site and the design you've created, that the signage we're proposing on this garage will serve to instruct patients that are visiting the site for the first time to find the site?
Yes. If this is their first time and they're traveling the Blue Route and they're heading south, yes. This will be part of that wayfinding experience of, even if they are using their Google Maps or what have you, there's still something that humans still want to know and have confirmation that they're going in the right direction. Something we see all the time is when there's not enough signage, people hesitate, they turn around, they ask questions, they're unsure. So this is something that provides that comfort and that confirmation to visitors.
And in your experience, is it your opinion, your expert opinion, that this signage is critical to safe arrival at facilities such as these?
At this size, yes. Yes.
One of the criteria for a variance, Renee, is that the relief that we're seeking is the minimum necessary to achieve the desired outcome. Do you believe, in your opinion, that signage could safely be placed lower on this building?
No.
Do you believe,
not at all.
Do you believe, in your opinion, that signage could be made smaller and still be and still serve the desired purpose?
No. Any smaller, again, we have these size calculations and manuals and charts but we also have to take into consideration the building itself and the scale and the viewing distance, and anything smaller would be hard to read and it would look like a mistake. It would look like poor planning. So what we're proposing here at the 82 square feet is the minimum appropriate sign.
And again, the natural features at this site drove you to design, or did the natural features at this site drive you to design the sign as you have in size and height?
Yes, and the position. We looked at different building, different faces of the building, and this is where we felt it was the most appropriate and had the most impact and made the most sense.
I have no other questions.
Okay. These are strange days. I apologize. One of our board members is without power and needs to add fuel to his generator. So we are going to take a 10-minute break. I apologize for the inconvenience, but these are the days we find ourselves in. I suggest everyone mutes their device and rejoins us at 9:45. Thank you.
Looks like he just got back in. Is he back in? Is he back on?
I don't think so, George.
I just saw him.
You saw Rich?
Yeah.
Did he get back on, or was he waiting for us to break before he actually?
He was waiting for us to break. He
Oh,
and I
okay.
have been exchanging text messages.
Okay, got it.
I think that's what happened, because he's now.
So, yeah. So I'm going on mute. I'm also turning my camera off. I would note for the board also that there's a public comment that I've been circulating, and we'll get to that. Thanks, everybody. Be right back. Okay, why don't we start regathering? I think we'll be able to see when everybody's back, but thank you. Just waiting on Mr. Nagel.
John, by looking at the radar, we probably have 30 minutes till all of our power is going to go out. So
Excellent. Good thing I'm at 17th and Market.
That sounds terrible.
It's coming, guys. It's coming.
Oh, you're serious? I thought maybe you were kidding just to move this along.
No. I just checked out the radar on one of the apps, and it's coming.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I used the last of my gasoline before this hearing started. My generator. My wife's gonna kill me.
That's my wife during the hearing went and purchased.
Siphon it out of the car like the good old days.
Yeesh.
Seems reasonable.
Well, our missing member is known for his stylish entrances. Hopefully he can hear us at this point.
Brad, I just hope whatever comes through cools us down.
It doesn't look like it, but who knows?
But I think the next purchase is a bigger generator.
Solar panels and a power wall.
I drove to my son's because I had no internet at home, and now a storm is rolling through right now.
Oh no!
And I'm watching the electricity out the window.
You know, that raises a rather interesting question. If we lose our court reporter, I'll leave that to the solicitor.
I have his number. I'll call him.
Okay. In the interest of time, I think we should proceed. George will rejoin us when he is able to do that. Mr. Nelson, do you have? Here he is.
There he is.
Speaking of the stylish entrance, Mr. Nelson, do you have questions for Ms. Orr?
Yes, I do have some questions for Ms. Orr. Good evening, Ms. Orr. Just to talk about the site and the blue route.
Excuse me, Mr. Nelson, you're not very clear. Something's wrong.
Oh, you hear me better now?
Not too much better.
I think it was better before, Peter, the first time, your first round of questioning.
Anything better now?
I'm going to do my best. It's not very clear at all.
Not clear at all here. Hold on. Oh, here I can go. I can go old school. Give me 2 seconds.
And if everyone else that's on can mute their connections as well, there's a few people that haven't muted. That really helps.
You can't hear me now, guys, right?
That's good now.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just move out the headphones. All right, hold on. Okay, Ms. Orr, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So in regards to the site in the blue route, there is no exit.
Okay, hold on. Now there's some reverberation or something happening. Is it happening with everybody?
It's breaking up. It's breaking up a little bit. I don't know if it's reverb more than it might just be transmission.
How about now?
Can you hear me now?
That's good.
Is that better? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I feel like an
Professional
airplane.
grade.
Feel like an airplane pilot. Okay, Miss Orr, you can hear me now too?
Perfectly, yes.
Excellent, good. So in regards to the blue route in the site, there's no exit directly off the blue route directly into the site, correct?
Directly into the site, no.
Okay. And the site is not directly off the off-ramp from the blue route, from southbound blue route, correct?
Correct.
You actually have to do a little zigzag to get to King of Prussia Road and then get into the site, correct?
Correct. You access the facility from King of Prussia Road.
And now you testify regarding safety and the size of lettering, correct?
Yes.
That being said, having no sign on the building probably would be the safest option because there would be no distraction to drivers, correct?
No, the safest would be a sign that's appropriately sized so that it is legible.
But that would still distract drivers. They still have to spend some time to read the sign, correct?
They would have to spend time reading the sign, but there are measures that are considered safe. They exist everywhere. Highway signs. It is not unsafe to spend half a second registering a message while you're driving.
And the quicker you could register that message, the better, correct?
Correct.
And so wouldn't it be quicker if the pen just had a sign showing their shield, if no lettering that needed to be read?
That's not in line with their branding. So that's not something that people would recognize by itself in that situation. So again, with this, it's about being consistent with what's done at all of their sites. Branding is very important in that aspect.
So the fact that they want to show the shield and the words Penn Medicine is all a branding aspect.
It's more than that. There's no such thing as just branding. Branding is everything for an organization. So yes, what we're showing in the lockup is what we need to have on that building.
But you could actually make the sign smaller and the letters bigger if you shortened that sign, correct?
That is not within the branding. And again, when you start doing that with a brand, it starts muddying the waters and it's not consistent. You have to be consistent.
But forget about branding, Miss Orr. Isn't it a fact that if they just had the word Penn up there, they could actually make a sign that was compliant or more compliant and yet have bigger letters and therefore be easier to read?
I don't think that it's a question that Stabby's saying that they're just putting a giant P up there. That's not Penn. That's not what they need to have on their building. I don't see how that's applicable.
So you say if they had a sign that just said Penn Med, people wouldn't realize what it was?
It's not about people not going that extra step and making that connection. It's that they shouldn't, that's not, again, that's not branding. That's not being consistent. It's about consistency. You do that at this location, then you change it for another location and change it for another location, and now your brand is going 7 different ways and you no longer have a brand.
So this is more about the size of the sign and the language of the sign is more about promoting Penn's brand than it is to try to comply with this particular township's ordinances. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's about keeping a consistent message throughout the organization. That's what it's about. It's about not promoting. It's about if they're going to identify a building, they need to be consistent. That's what it's about.
Now,
If they're not consistent, it loses everything.
You testified a bit about the differences between health organizations and companies such as Wawa or Taco Bell and their different methods of branding, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, isn't it true that an organization like Penn doesn't need its sign to bring in customers, unlike a Taco Bell or a Wawa?
Those are completely different business models. You can't compare an outpatient specialty center and healthcare to somebody filling up their gas tank and getting a drink. Those are two completely different sets of people going to those locations, how they arrive at those locations, what their emotional state is when they're on their way to those locations. It's completely different. I think that comparison is not applicable to this.
Okay, that was my question, that they are completely different. And
So what's
and that the needs and the branding purposes are completely different, correct?
They are, yes.
Last, Ian, can you, I sent you a exhibit T4. Is it possible for you to put that up, please? Miss Orr, do you recognize what this is a photo of?
Yes.
And this is a photo of the building being constructed upon this site, correct?
Yes.
And it's a photo of this building from the middle of King of Prussia Road, correct?
Yes.
And you can fully see the fronts of this building from King of Prussia Road, correct?
When you say front, you mean the side of the building that's facing the road?
Yes.
Okay. It is not the side of the road where the entrance is, or it's not the side of the building where the entrance is, just so you know. The entrance does not face King of Prussia. The actual building entrance does not face King of Prussia.
Correct, but the vehicular entrance is from King of Prussia Road, right?
Correct.
And this vehicular entrance is actually going right where this picture is, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Give me 2 seconds, Ms. Orr, but I think I'm done with my questions for you.
Okay.
Oh, and just one little point. The way you've measured this sign, a box that encompasses all the letters. That's the normal classic way of measuring sign area, correct?
The attorney, Peter Nelson.
Correct.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Orr. That's all I have.
Okay.
Okay, are there any questions from members of the board? Or I'm sorry, first, Mr. Falcone, is there any redirect?
Yes, just a couple. Thanks, Mr. Riley. Renee, let's go back to exhibit T4, if we could, please. Ian. That was the last township exhibit we saw. Thanks. Renee, you were asked a couple questions about this exhibit and the signage and the building and the access points here. Do you recall that line of questioning from Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
And
yes.
On this side of the building, King of Prussia Road, we are not proposing building signage. Is that correct? Building signage above the permitted 15 feet.
Correct. We are not proposing signage on any part of the building except for on the canopy at the main building entrance.
But we do have signage that is visible from this road. Is that correct, that we're proposing?
There is a freestanding monument sign at this intersection at the entrance to the site.
And does that signage say Penn Medicine with a shield?
Yes.
And the reason, is there a reason you didn't propose building signage higher than 15 feet visible from King of Prussia Road?
Yes, because it was not permitted.
What was permitted?
40 square foot sign mounted below 15 feet from grade.
Another line of questioning, let me actually step back one more time. Does the applicant feel that it has appropriate signage on this road?
On King of Prussia Road, yes, we have adequate signage.
You were asked a question again about accessing this site and whether you access it from the Blue Route. You recall that line of questioning?
Yes, if it was directly accessed from the Blue Route.
Are you able to explain to the board whether or not you are required to access Lancaster Avenue prior to entering King of Prussia Road when exiting the Blue Route? Do you have that information?
I do not.
Okay. The last question I'll have for you, the last area of questions, again, gets back to the messaging and that area of testimony that you gave with respect to the difference between a Wawa or another retail type establishment and this medical establishment. You testified that you felt there was a difference between this type of industry, medical, versus the retail. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is it your opinion that patients accessing this site require more or less building identification than those patrons accessing a Wawa or a Taco Bell?
More, and maybe I wasn't clear with our first question, but we need more here. We aren't relying on a consistency of architecture across all of our sites, all Penn sites. We are relying on the building signage to let people know that we are in this building, that Penn is in this building. There's nothing else we're relying on. There's nothing else that is necessarily consistent from one site to the other except for the brand. So yes, we needed a lot more than a Wawa would need their sign. They have a lot of other elements going on.
And you were asked questions about why not simply change that brand and make it shorter, less large in order to comply. You said you couldn't do that. It would change the brand. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you believe that using different signage for different locations would create additional confusion?
Yes. Yes, it would.
And in a situation where you have traffic moving more rapidly, like on a highway, is additional confusion good or bad?
It's bad.
People that are visiting this site, what are they looking for when they're coming down the Blue Route?
Penn Medicine, they're looking for their logo. They're looking for, they know they're getting close. If they're using a map or written directions or Google Maps, they know they're getting close. This is their exit. They have a break in the trees. They look to their right. Oh, there it is. There's the logo. Great. I know where I need to go now. I know what the building already looks like. I know the colors. It'll be easy for me. I'm not second guessing anything.
They're not looking for just any medical facility, right?
Right.
Now, when you need gas, what are you looking for? A Wawa or a gas station?
A gas station.
I've got no additional questions for Ms. Orr.
Okay. Questions from the board?
I have a quick question. This is Richard Weitzman. I'm on. So if we could look at A6, and Ms. Orr, I'm wondering if you know how far the exit is to Lancaster Avenue from this perspective. Do you know what the distance is from here to the exit?
I do not. No, I don't.
That's all I have. Actually, I will. I'll ask one more follow-up. Is it your testimony that the signage for the exit itself is somehow inadequate?
No, not at all.
I have nothing else.
Yeah, John, it is Brad, I'll go. You can keep that exhibit up. So let me make sure. I have a couple questions, but if you could put this back up. So let's say, for argument's sake, it just so happens you guys are lucky enough to have this little window here where there's no trees. But if there were trees here, we wouldn't be here right now at all. Was that your testimony?
No. If there were no trees, we wouldn't be here. No, that's not accurate.
So there's testimony by the other witness that it has to go up there because there's telephone lines, and it has to go up there because there's a little tree that happens to be in the second floor that blocks the view of the sign. So the argument is, well, it has to go on the top because those things are blocking.
Brad.
And my question is,
Brad, somebody else's line is unmuted and they keep cutting you off.
Sure. John, all right, there we go. So there was testimony, I'll restate it. So there was testimony before that the reason why it has to be so high up is because there are SEPTA power lines blocking a view of the sign, as well as a very, very, very skinny tree. And the testimony was, well, it has to be up there because that's the only way it's visible. And so I guess my question is if we had a whole row of trees here, we wouldn't be here right now. So meaning if tomorrow, whoever owns this property puts up a whole line of trees or puts some sound barriers in there, your whole reason for needing the sign is no longer valid.
If the building is not visible, then no, we would not put a sign there where the building is not visible. If there's no way for anyone to see it, we would not propose a sign there, which is why we didn't propose a sign on the other direction, on the northbound, because that didn't serve a purpose. We're proposing it here because this serves a purpose. The other one was just purely advertising. It'd be great to have, but we don't need it. This we feel we need.
And is the reason why Penn is moving to this site is because people are having trouble finding the other site coming from the highway and they need more identification?
I can't speak to why Penn has made this decision to move.
Sure. I guess my other question, are you familiar with the area? Have you driven around?
Yes.
Okay. So is this kind of one of the only large scale buildings in the area?
No.
No. Okay. So I guess the logic that I'm hearing is that because it's so high up and it's so big, it can be visible, and I understand that. But I would think most businesses that were in very large buildings would have that same want and need. It's better if you can see a building from a half a mile away for identification purposes versus being 15 feet away from it and waiting for a land sign.
I've run into this at other with other clients, and what is constantly being said by patients or visitors is that, oh, there wasn't a sign. Oh, there wasn't a sign. I thought that was your building, but there wasn't a sign. There should be a sign. So sometimes people, they expect to see identification, and when there isn't one, it confuses them. It makes them second guess themselves. So this is a situation where they're on their way. This is their path of travel. They see a building, say there's no branding. They get off, they go there, and they walk in, they go, oh, well, why wasn't there a sign? I didn't realize that was your building. It's just something that it gets brought up. It confuses visitors when they see it. They pass it, they come in and they go, oh, I didn't know this was you. I thought my GPS was wrong.
Right. But
it's just something that confuses visitors.
I get that. But one of the things that we have to contend with when we're thinking about hardships is and we just read about this in one of the opinions, one of our cases, is that it can't be unique to the property owner as opposed to it being unique to the property. So, I understand the absolute logic that you can't put a sign where the grade is, where the basically sign is going to be below most of the grade. That makes sense to me. I mean, that seems like a very straightforward variance discussion. But to say, look, it needs to be more than 3 times the height distance, and we're saying it really needs to be at the top because it's got the best vantage point, not necessarily because of any other reason. You know, you can call it safety or whatever, but because to me, one of the things that you, when you deal with other zoning codes, there's something called a building skyline identification, and that's very clear. And that's when counties and townships are saying we want buildings to be visible from far, far away. Now we don't have that, and so that's where I'm looking at this, saying we're trying to basically take a provision that is very, very limiting, and I think it's cosmetic in nature. It wants the township to look a certain way, and we're kind of turning it on its heel. So if I'm going to think about granting the variance, I think it needs to be really a very strong hardship that we're appealing to, as opposed to it just makes it directionally better, but ignore the fact that we're moving less than a half a mile away. Now, if you're brand new, no one knew you were here, then I'd be like, boy, that's a better argument. I get that. But the fact is the building that most of these doctors are moving to is not less than probably a quarter mile away. So I'm just saying, I'm struggling with the hardship being, you know, this signage will help be directional and I feel like it is. This is just my feeling. I'm feeling like it's more of a brand thing. I want to get some advertising, and I get to do it like no one else from the township. And boy, did I get lucky that I happen to put the building here. So I'm good. That's the end of my questions, or at least for right now.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Okay, hearing none. I have no questions for this witness. Mr. Falcone, anything else for the board's consideration this evening?
No, I guess I'd just like to move our exhibits into the record, as long as Gus and Peter don't have an issue with that. I'd like for them to be accepted.
I have no objection to any of the exhibits.
Okay, they're entered without objection. Mr. Nelson?
I'm calling no witnesses. I also asked to move exhibits T1 through T4 into the record, please.
No objection.
Okay, without objection. We have received public comment on this application, and Solicitor Economides, I had sent you one version of it. The public commenter actually sent a series of emails. So I just want to ensure that the parties have been provided with the most recent copy of that public comment.
They were.
And I believe, okay, they have, okay. So I will now attempt to bring this comment into the record, and then would ask the parties to share their thoughts on this. And this is a series of what ended up being 5 different emails, so bear with me as I read from the bottom up. This is a comment from Ms. Susan Byrne, who writes, there may be some typos here, so I'm going to have to struggle a bit here. I worked on a billboard ordinance. How does this plan differ? The next email goes on to remark size, comma, placement, question mark. Also, 476 is a scenic highway. The sign can't be visible from the highway. The third email goes on to comment, can't do it. Scenic highway, Peter. It opens a Pandora's box. The fourth email goes on to comment, billboard ordinance, probably 10 years ago, in place, designed to prohibit large signs. So there are 2 strikes, the ordinance and larger than that. the scenic highway requirements. I get wayfinding. All colleges have directional signs. Thanks. And then the final comment is, I'm not terribly worried about Penn. It's the organizations that follow, the precedent that will be set. So that is the sum and substance of the public comments. Mr. Falcone, do you have thoughts or responses on those comments?
I don't.
Mr. Nelson?
No, nothing from me on the comments.
Okay. Okay, so they have been entered into the record. And at this point, unless the solicitor advises me otherwise, I'd like a closing statement from Mr. Falcone and then from Mr. Nelson, and we'll take it from there.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing, do you want to formally close the public comment just in case? So that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you. The record's now closed with the entry of that one public comment that 5 public comments that we received. Mr. Falcone.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Thank you, everyone, for making time tonight in this unique setting. It's my first Zoom hearing. I hope it's my last. So that's got that going for us. We appreciate kind of all the conversation tonight around this signage. And frankly, when we were coming through this process, I felt like we would eventually end up at this point in the process when we were building the building and looking at signage. We believe strongly that the signage that we're proposing is necessary to deliver the programming that Penn needs. We think the existing Penn facility is adequately signed for that property. And indeed, we do have the signage we need on the 2 roads that it fronts. And this business, as you've heard tonight from our expert and from Mr. Swanson, really is not a drive-by business. So while the signage is important for identification purposes, it identifies this spot as the singular location for the patient to arrive at. It is plainly distinct from almost any other business. A patient looking to arrive at this facility is looking to arrive exactly there at the exact time they're supposed to be there for the exact reason they are supposed to be there. There's no walk-in traffic. There's no drive-by, I think I'll quick go see my doctor and have a visit. I can tell you from personal experience, I have no desire to go see my doctor ever unless I absolutely need to be there. So to compare this signage to a sign that is convenient, we don't believe that in our model. We would have absolutely signed it differently had the ordinance not been written the way it was. We would have placed signage, billboard type signage, Mr. Riley, facing the traffic heading north, simply for that brand show, so that we could have the name out there more frequently, larger. We elected not to do that because the ordinance here was restrictive. We did find it appropriate, though, that there are only 2 roads that this facility fronts on. One is King of Prussia. We have the ability to place a monument sign there to totally comply with the township ordinance, and we've done that. The other road is the Blue Route. There is a small window that will never be covered. There's a train running through that area. There are train tracks that stop the growth of trees. So the window that we have is the window we have. And you can see those openings and those tracks in the exhibits we've presented. The signage is absolutely restricted from some of the features that are on this property. Could they change? It's possible. Could we bury lines? Sure, they could bury lines. Could trees come down? Possibly, but it's unlikely that they'll clear all the trees along 476. Now, granted, what we've seen around this area as far as tree clearing, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's highly unlikely that all of these trees will be cleared. And this site will be plainly visible for hundreds of feet. We have a small window to identify this building. We believe, based on the business that we have, that delivering this message, delivering this identification for the building is critical to individual patient experience. That is what Penn delivers. Individualized patient experience. It's unlike any other. And part of that is the fact that it's the University of Pennsylvania. It's Penn Medicine. And that image and that brand, while we love to see it for advertising purposes, it's critical for identification purposes. It's critical for the moment of arrival. And that's what we're speaking to here. We think there is a hardship. We think there's a natural hardship here that allows the sign to be both higher than permitted and larger than permitted. There are safety concerns. If this sign were smaller, it would cause additional driver distraction to read it. We have testimony, expert testimony, that says that's a danger on the highway. We believe we're entitled to the signage. Any office building, any medical office building, and any ambulatory care building, which houses those, is entitled to a wall sign. So if we built this building and installed compliant signage, it would be irrelevant. It would be unreadable and dangerous. So we believe, based on the natural conditions of this property, we're entitled to place our wall sign on this wall at a readable, legible height and at a readable, legible size. To do any other would be not only a disservice to the building, but it would be a danger to the community who are going to identify this building. We're seeking the variances at the minimum necessary, we believe, to satisfy our requirement, to meet the identification and branding purpose for this applicant. It is unique to this applicant. And therefore, we've enlisted experts to provide testimony based on speed, based on letter height, based on identification purposes. We've engaged our architect to design a sign package along with the expert to identify this building. It's the minimum necessary we think we can safely provide. We appreciate your consideration.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, thank you. To begin with, I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Riley, in that I'm not even sure they're allowed to have this sign at all. If you read the language of the section of the ordinance that they're seeking a variance to, it doesn't seem to apply to this particular property. They're putting a sign on a parking garage, not on a building that's dedicated to office use. So I question that fact from the get-go. Getting past that point, I don't think they've met any of the elements necessary to be granted this requested variance. There is no hardship on the property. First off, they have, as they admit, 4 signs on the property that are compliant. They have signs that are compliant along King of Prussia Road that show people how to get to the property at the entrance to the property. The fact that there's a problem because the blue route is next to the property, I don't think actually is a physical characteristic of this property that leads to a hardship. Secondly, they can and are using the property in compliance right this very moment. They have not been able, there's been absolutely no testimony stating that, without this variance, our use of this property, we can't use it. We can't use the property in compliance with the zoning ordinance requirements concerning the size of the sign. And furthermore, the fact that they've used a property a quarter of a mile away for more than 20 years without a large building sign like this, without signage on the blue route, quote unquote, directing people to them, I think is a really strong indication that this sign is not necessary to use this property. I think the testimony clearly shows that the need for this sign is self-created. They want the requested sign to advertise their location. They want the size of the sign and the message on the sign because it matches their branding, not because they can't make a sign that complies with our zoning or that more complies with our zoning than they're proposing. I think the testimony clearly shows that, yeah, they could make a smaller sign you know, a smaller sign with smaller a message, such as just their seal, such as just pen, such as just pen med. That sign would clearly be smaller than what they're proposing, but they've said, no, we can't do that because of branding. I don't think that's sufficient to meet this element of not being self-created. Furthermore, I think the evidence shows that they could put the sign lower on the building and that it would still be visible. It might not be as visible as what they're proposing, but it certainly wouldn't be not visible if they moved it further down the building, and therefore it would be more compliant. I don't think they actually proved that the sign doesn't alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The essential character of the neighborhood is not allowing large signs high up on buildings. There's other large buildings in this area that don't have this size of sign this far up high on the building. I don't think they've met that fourth element. And the fifth element, once again, is the minimum variance necessary. You know, I think the testimony shows that they could have a smaller sign that actually had larger lettering and therefore would be safer. And that sign could be lower on the building. I don't think they've proved that what they're requesting is the minimum variance necessary. As for the reasons for this sign, I just don't buy this need or this argument that it somehow provides wayfinding to people to get to this building. As they put it, these are people who are specifically going to this building. If they don't know where it is, they're going to have some way of finding it, be it GPS, be it their phone, be it old written out directions that they figured out like we used to do 20, 30 years ago. They're not just going to, you know, wing it and say, okay, I know it's somewhere down the blue route. I'll see signs for it. I'll get off. That's not, no one is doing that. So people have directions how to get there. And furthermore, seeing a sign on this building on the blue route is not going to help them find the actual entrance. You can't, well, one, if you're driving north on the blue route, you're not going to see it in time. Driving south on the blue route, you better be in the right-hand lane to get off, because otherwise you're probably going to, you know, cause an accident swerving over to get off at that point in time. Moreover, once you get off, you're not going to be at the building. You have to know you have to take a right onto Lancaster, you have to take a left on King of Prussia, and the building's going to be up on your right. In fact, if you want to actually identify the building and have people say, oh, that's Penn Med's building, it'd probably be much more helpful to have a building sign on the King of Prussia frontage than on the blue route frontage, because that would help people identify, oh yeah, okay, there's Penn Medicine. Okay, this is where I must turn. And then last but not least, you know, there's no guarantee just because they lucked out by having a building that can overlook the blue route, that has a little gap in the trees because of the train line, doesn't mean they are guaranteed to have a sign there. The only guarantee they have is they can have a sign there that meets our zoning regulations. If they can't meet our zoning regulations with a sign on the blue route, they have to meet the 5 elements necessary for a variance, and they clearly do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, counsel. At this point, would anyone like to offer a motion for consideration?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. My motion is to deny the variance both on the height and size.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's discuss the motion, the proposal to deny the requested relief. Brad?
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand first and foremost. I mean, I think you made a great point, let alone on 280-123B, that we should even be here, given the strict language of the PLO for signs in a PLO district. That's one, but as I say, let's kind of table that for right now. I'm concurring that, you know, I think the hardship that they're claiming is to a certain extent, in a way, you know, it's the property owner made it. You know, their logic being that if this was an office building, they wouldn't be able to do it. But because because they're going to be a hospital or a medical facility, then they are entitled to something that is greater than an office. And I don't disagree with. I disagree with that. I think, you know, if identification of a business is important, it's important no matter what you do. But on another side, you know, to me, it's certainly not the minimum relief necessary. And I know for a fact, when you go around this area, there are a number of tall buildings that I'm sure would appreciate having a sign, a very large sign. Especially landlords would love to have businesses to be able to put a sign of one of their tenants on their buildings to show that they're there. I mean, that's what you see along 202, and that's why they have an ordinance that allows those types of signs there. It just so happens that Radnor does not, and my assumption being is it's about aesthetics. So absent I would say a hardship, and again, I also have an issue with the minimum relief. I understand that putting it below 15 feet definitely would not work here. There's no doubt about that. So I would be open to at least making it a little bit higher. How high, I'm not really sure. And I guess I'm also on the side of, it doesn't necessarily have to be that big either. You know, if it's identification sign, I think it can be smaller. Again, so I think it's failing on the hardship, and I think it's failing on the neighborhood as well as the minimum necessary.
Okay, thanks, Brett. George, Rich?
Am I on?
You are.
Okay. Well, I think, we had a lot of testimony here, and very much appreciated. It was helpful. I am also struggling with the hardship issue. I mean, the fact is, access to the facility is King of Prussia Road. It's not the Blue Route. There's testimony that there's ample signage on King of Prussia Road. Anyone driving up King of Prussia Road, they're going to have the address of the building. There's no source of confusion there. There is no access from the Blue Route, so I don't see the need to have a sign on the Blue. Will that sign help somebody find it? It might. I mean, somebody flying by in their car, if they happen to see it out of the corner of their eye, will confirm that, okay, I guess that's it, and I guess this is the right exit. But I just don't see where, if you don't have that sign, somehow somebody's not going to make their appointment. I didn't hear any testimony that University of Pennsylvania's business is going to be negatively affected somehow if they don't have the sign on the garage. So that's what I'm struggling with on the hardship issue. There was a lot of testimony about distraction, and I don't know that that's really relevant. I think the best case would be no sign, because then there's no distraction. I think that's pretty clear. But this is a property. It doesn't front on the Blue Route. It happens to be 280 to 300 feet away from the Blue Route. No direct access. There's a railroad track in between, and the fact that you couldn't see a sign from 300 feet away on a busy highway, I don't see that as a hardship relevant to this particular property. So that's where I am.
Rich?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I concur with what I've heard so far. I do empathize with patients and the stress of somebody that needs to attend or to visit this particular facility. Most certainly the idea of de-stressing that that visit is understood, but I too struggle with whether or not this proposed sign is directional, as we've heard, as opposed to something else. And really, I think it was Mr. Nelson mentioned that by the time you get to this building, if you're not in that right-hand lane to exit, you're going to miss the exit. Nothing about the sign would direct you to exit where you need to, and by the time you get to it, you're going to miss it. So I think it's a big ask. The height perhaps, but the size is beyond what I think would be acceptable for purposes of establishing that hardship.
Okay, thanks, Rich. My consideration of the request really is quite similar to that of the other members of the board. I don't think there is a hardship here. I certainly understand why the trustees would want this sign. It certainly is something that accomplishes important goals for the facility. But the fact that it might be useful or have value for the property owner or the tenant in and of itself is not sufficient to satisfy the requirements for the showing of a hardship, which I don't believe have been shown here. So with that, I'll call the vote. I'll call it by roll. Mr. Nagel, do you approve? How do you vote on the motion to reject the relief requested by the applicant?
I support the motion to reject the application.
Mr. DeLizia?
Support the motion to reject.
Rich, what do you say?
It's such an awkward way to say it, but yes, I support the motion.
Yeah. And I also support the motion to deny the relief requested. So that vote is four in favor of the motion, none against. There being no further business before us this evening, I would let everyone know that our next meeting will be Thursday, June the 18th. It might be through the facility of Zoom. It might be in person. I don't know. We'll see what that holds. But thank you everyone for your presentations this evening and your patience with the technology and the procedures. And we're adjourned.